Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving into some absolutely brutal stories about people who've been pushed to their limits by the ones they live with. So grab your favourite drink, get cozy, maybe turn off your phone, and let's explore some stories that'll make you feel a lot less alone in your frustrations. Our first story comes from someone dealing with what might be the most exhausting battle over an alarm clock you've ever heard. My roommate has completely destroyed my ability to sleep and refuses to acknowledge that it's even a problem. I work as a software developer and I need to be sharp when I come into the office. My mental capacity is everything in my job, and I usually wake up around 7 a.m. to get ready and start my day by 8:30. But for the past 3 weeks, my mornings have turned into an absolute nightmare because of my roommate's alarm situation. Here's the thing. My roommate apparently sets alarms every 5 minutes starting at 5 a.m. Not because he needs to wake up at 5 a.m. No, he sets them every 5 minutes until around 6:30 a.m. when he supposedly wakes up. But here's the worst part, and this is what's driving me insane. He sleeps through literally all of them. Every single one. Meanwhile, I'm lying in bed hearing this constant barrage of alarms going off. Beep, beep, beep. Every 5 minutes. It's like living in a nightmare where someone's phone is possessed by a demon. The first week, I thought maybe it was a phase. I figured he'd get sick of it and stop. But no. Day after day, the same thing. Wake up at 5 a.m. to alarms, can't fall back asleep because I'm just waiting for the next one to go off. My brain can't settle down. I'm lying there thinking, is he going to wake up this time? Is this alarm going to be the one? And my whole body's tense. By the time 6:30 a.m. rolls around and the alarms finally stop, I'm exhausted. I could fall back asleep, but at that point I only have an hour before I need to get up anyway, so I just lay there, increasingly frustrated and tired. I figured I should talk to him about it. I mean, this is something reasonable people can discuss, right? So I waited for a moment when things seemed calm and I brought it up casually. I said, "Hey man, I've noticed your alarms have been going off really early in the morning, like every 5 minutes starting at 5 a.m. Would it be cool if you adjusted that? I'm having trouble sleeping through it." Pretty reasonable ask, pretty straightforward. His response, "Oh yeah, I probably don't set them as much as you think. You're probably just noticing it more because you're tired." Are you kidding me? I'm not imagining this. I'm lying in bed for an hour and a half counting them, but I stayed calm. I tried to not be confrontational. I said, "No, I'm pretty sure it's every 5 minutes from 5 to about 6:30. Would you be able to set one alarm instead? Or maybe put your phone farther from your bed so you have to get up to turn it off?" That's a legitimate solution. That's a compromise. He said, "Look, I'm a heavy sleeper. I need multiple alarms or I won't get up for work." Fair enough, I get that. But then he said, "Besides, it's not that early. 5 a.m. is not even that bad." Not that bad? Buddy, I don't go to sleep until after midnight sometimes because I'm working or just trying to unwind after a stressful day. So for me, having an alarm invade my sleep starting at 5 a.m. is absolutely that bad. But he just didn't see it as an issue. To him, he had a problem. He had a solution. End of story. My suffering was completely irrelevant. By week 2, I was genuinely struggling. My work was starting to suffer because I was exhausted. I'm a developer. I need to think clearly, debug code, solve problems, and I'm showing up to work feeling like a zombie. I made mistakes on a project that I normally wouldn't make. My team lead even asked me if everything was okay because I seemed off. I couldn't really explain that my roommate is torturing me with an alarm clock situation. I brought it up again, this time a little more directly. I said, "This is seriously affecting my sleep and my work. Is there any way you could set the alarm for 6:15 a.m. instead and put your phone across the room so you have to get out of bed?" He looked annoyed that I was bringing it up again. He said, "I'm not changing my alarm routine because you're a light sleeper. That's not my problem." C'est not his problem. That's when I felt something snap inside me. We're living in the same apartment. We share walls. We agreed to be roommates. How is my ability to sleep not even slightly his problem? I tried a different approach. I bought earplugs. Good ones. actually decent noise-cancelling earplugs, but the alarms were so frequent and in such close proximity that even with earplugs, I could hear the vibration or some muffled version of the sound. I was still waking up. So that didn't work. I suggested he wake me up instead of setting 17 alarms. He said he didn't want the pressure of responsibility. I suggested a smart alarm that gradually gets louder so it won't be so jarring for me. He said it was too expensive. By week 3, I was losing it. I had been reduced to barely functional. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, and they weren't quality hours. I was short with my colleagues. I was frustrated all the time. I felt trapped because I couldn't even do anything about it. He had made it clear he wasn't willing to change a single thing. I tried one last conversation. I sat him down and said, "This situation is unsustainable. I'm not sleeping. My work is suffering. My mental health is suffering. We need to find a solution together." He literally rolled his eyes. He said, "If it's that much of an issue, why don't you move out?" Why don't I move out? I pay half the rent. I signed a lease. I live here just as much as he does. The burden shouldn't fall on me to leave because he refuses to manage his alarm like an adult. He was gaslighting me at this point, making it seem like I was the unreasonable one for asking him to not assault my ears with constant noise starting at 5 a.m. I realised that conversation wasn't going anywhere, so I reached out to my landlord about the situation. I explained it was affecting my habitability of the apartment. My landlord basically said it's a roommate issue and not something they could intervene on unless it was violating quiet hours. Apparently, 5 a.m. alarms don't technically count as a noise violation. I'm currently looking for a new place to live, and I've basically accepted that I'm going to have to be the one to move because my roommate will never see his actions as something that needs to change. He's gotten what he wanted. He gets to keep his alarm routine, and I get to leave. I'm furious about it. I shouldn't have to uproot my living situation because someone else won't take 5 seconds to think about how their choices affect the people around them. Okay, wow, that's absolutely infuriating. The fact that he heard this is affecting my sleep and my work and decided that was not his problem is honestly wild. Like, you live with this person, you share an apartment. The bare minimum of human decency is considering how your habits impact the people sharing your space. Instead, he was just like, "Sounds like a you problem, buddy," and then had the audacity to suggest, "You move out." That's not compromise. That's just him refusing to be a decent human being. This is exactly the kind of situation that makes you realise some people just don't have the capacity to think about anyone but themselves. Alright, so this next one is about trust communication and the absolutely devastating moment when you realise your partner has been doing the one thing you specifically asked them not to do. This person's story is the kind of thing that makes you question everything about a relationship you thought was solid. So let's get into it. I've been with my partner for 4 years. We're talking about moving in together soon, maybe getting engaged next year if things keep going the way they have been. Or at least, that's what I thought before last week. I genuinely believed we had one of those relationships where communication was our strong suit. We always talked things out. Or so I thought. Last Thursday, I was using their laptop to order something online while they were in the shower. Their email was already open, and I wasn't trying to snoop or anything, but I saw a notification pop up from their ex. Not just any notification, it was a message thread, and I could see snippets of the most recent message in the preview. It said something like, "Yeah, they never listen to me either." You'd think after 4 years. I know I shouldn't have looked, I get that, but once I saw those words I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen them. So I opened the email thread, and what I found absolutely gutted me. There were dozens of messages, dozens, dating back months. My partner had been sending long, detailed emails to their ex, complaining about me. Not casual venting, structured, thoughtful emails where they'd laid out everything they apparently hated about our relationship, and me specifically. They were talking about how I don't listen when they're stressed, how I prioritise my work over them, how I'm not affectionate enough, how I dismiss their feelings. They were painting me as this emotionally unavailable, selfish person who doesn't care about their needs. None of this had ever come up in conversation between us. Not once. We hadn't thought about any of these things. We hadn't discussed them. There were no warning signs that my partner felt this way. And yet here they were, pouring their heart out to their ex, someone they swore they weren't in contact with anymore, instead of just talking to me. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The shower turned off, and I just closed the laptop and sat there staring at it. When they came out, they could immediately tell something was wrong. They kept asking what happened, why I looked upset. I didn't answer right away because I was trying to figure out how to bring this up without sounding like I'd invaded their privacy. But also, I was so angry that I didn't care about how it sounded anymore. I told them I'd seen the emails. Their entire face went white. They didn't try to deny it or make excuses at first. They just sat down and looked sick. After a minute, they asked me what I'd read. I told them I'd seen enough to understand. They'd been telling their ex I was a bad partner and that we had serious problems that we'd never actually discussed. That's when they started talking. They admitted that yes, they'd been emailing their ex for months. They said they did it because they needed to vent to someone who understood them, and their ex just gets them in a way I don't. They said they didn't bring these complaints to me because they didn't want to hurt me or start a fight. They said they were just trying to process their feelings privately. They said it didn't mean anything, that venting to their ex wasn't a betrayal. It was just therapy. Therapy, that's what they called it. I asked them why they couldn't vent to me, their actual partner. Why did they have to go to the person they used to date? They said they were afraid of how I'd react, that I'd get defensive, that I'd turn it into a conversation about what I was doing wrong, instead of listening to what they needed. So instead of communicating with me, the person in the relationship, who could actually do something about their concerns, they went to their ex and painted me as this villain. And here's the thing that really destroyed me. Some of the complaints weren't even accurate. They told their ex that I never want to spend time with them, but last month we specifically planned a whole weekend getaway. They said I never ask about their day, but I do that constantly. They made it sound like I was this cold, unavailable person, and I just wasn't. Or at least, I didn't think I was. I asked them to show me the full email thread. They refused at first, said it was private and it would only hurt me more, but I told them that if we were going to move forward from this, I needed to see everything. They eventually sent me the entire conversation thread, and I read through all of it that night while they slept on the couch. My partner had been telling their ex things about our intimate life, things about what we fought about, things about my family, my insecurities, my work stress. All of it had been shared with this person who they claimed was just a casual ex they didn't really talk to anymore. The emails were so detailed, so personal. It felt like they'd given their ex access to a version of me I never even got to defend myself against. The worst part was seeing how their ex had been responding, encouraging them to vent, saying things like, "You deserve better, and I always told you that you two weren't right for each other." It became clear that their ex wasn't just a neutral, listening ear. They were actively filling my partner's head with doubts about us, and my partner was eating it up. When we finally sat down to talk the next day, I asked them directly, did they still have feelings for their ex? Were they unhappy in our relationship? Did they want to break up? They said no to all of it. They said they love me, and they don't know why they went to their ex instead of me. They said it was a mistake, a really stupid mistake, and they were sorry. But here's what I can't let go of. If they love me, why was their first instinct to confide in their ex instead of me? Why would they send emails about how I don't listen, when all they had to do was have one conversation with me about it? Why would they let their ex sit there and trash talk our relationship instead of shutting that down? And most importantly, how many other things are they not telling me that they're telling someone else? I asked them to stop all contact with their ex. They agreed, deleted the email thread, blocked them on social media. They even offered to go to couples therapy to work on communication. But I can't shake this feeling that the foundation of what I thought we had is cracked. I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel like I can trust what they're telling me. If they're not happy, I want to know. I want to hear it from them. not find out through a laptop mishap 6 months from now. We're still together, but everything feels different. I look at them and I think about how they were writing those emails while sitting next to me on the couch, how they were complaining that I don't listen while actively choosing not to listen to me by taking their problems to someone else. I don't know how to come back from this. I don't know if we can. Okay, so that one hits different, doesn't it? The betrayal here isn't just about the emails existing, it's about the choice to go literally anywhere else instead of just having one hard conversation with the person you're supposed to build a life with. And the fact that they had reasons for not communicating, that just makes it worse because they had every opportunity to fix it and instead went backward to an ex. That's rough. Alright, so this next one is about a guy who basically did all the work planning a group trip, only to find out he wasn't actually invited. And I mean, the audacity here is just unreal. So I've got this friend group, right? Been together since college, and we're all in our late 20s now, trying to coordinate schedules and actually do things together. Which honestly is harder than it sounds when everyone's got jobs and responsibilities. Back in April, one of my friends texted the group chat about doing a week-long beach trip in September. Everyone was hyped about it. We'd all agreed it sounded amazing and we needed a vacation. So naturally, since I'm apparently the only one who actually enjoys planning things, I volunteered to handle the logistics. And I don't mean I just casually threw out the offer. I actually took charge. I spent probably 3 or 4 hours researching beach towns within reasonable driving distance. I looked into different rental houses, compared prices, checked availability, read reviews. I made a whole spreadsheet breaking down costs per person, different accommodation options with pros and cons for each. I even researched activities and restaurants in the area so we could figure out what we wanted to do. I made a document with everything organised, lodging options, estimated costs, what to pack, driving routes, everything. Then I presented it to the group. I sent the spreadsheet to the group chat and broke down the top 3 rental options. I explained the pros and cons of each beach town. I had honestly done way more work than necessary, but I was excited about this trip. Like, genuinely excited. I had taken time off work to do this research. I was thinking about how fun it would be. All of us together. No work stress. It felt like something we really needed. The response was great. Everyone loved the options. They asked questions, I answered them, we voted on the best beach town, and I got us a solid 3-bedroom rental house right on the beach. It was exactly what we needed, and at a price everyone felt good about. People started sending me their availability for dates. I was coordinating everything. I was the project manager of this entire trip. I created a group chat specifically for trip logistics. I worked out the driving schedule, who would drive when, what car we'd take. I researched the best route. I made sure everyone knew what they needed to bring. I was really on top of it. By mid-June, everything was locked in. The house was booked, dates were confirmed, people had requested time off work. Everyone was talking about how excited they were. And honestly, I was probably the most excited because I'd invested so much energy into making it perfect. Then in August, about a month before the trip, I noticed something. One of my friends had posted a story on Instagram from a group chat. But it wasn't the trip logistics chat. It was a different group chat. When I looked closer at the details in the story, I realised it was about trip planning. But I wasn't in that chat. I knew immediately something was wrong. I didn't say anything at first. I was confused. Maybe it was just a smaller side conversation, I thought. But then another friend liked to comment about the trip on that same chat, and I realised this was probably a bigger deal than I wanted to admit. I finally just asked directly in the group chat. I was trying to sound casual about it, but I was already feeling anxious. I was like, hey, what's this other chat people keep posting from? There was this awkward silence, like actual silence in a text conversation, which is somehow worse than a real conversation because you can just imagine everyone reading it and not knowing what to say. Then finally, one of them responded. They said, "Oh, that's just a smaller planning thing. Don't worry about it." That made no sense to me. I was the person who had literally done all the planning. What smaller planning thing could there be? I asked what was happening on that chat. And after like 20 minutes of uncomfortable back and forth, someone finally admitted that a few of them were reorganizing the trip. Reorganizing. The trip I had completely planned and booked and coordinated. I asked what that meant, and the explanation started falling apart. They said they had realized the house might not be big enough and wanted to look at other options, but the house was literally the perfect size. 3 bedrooms, 6 people. We'd all agreed on it. I had confirmed with everyone on it. Then another person jumped in and said maybe the dates didn't work for everyone anymore. But dates had been confirmed. I had all the confirmations. The truth came out slowly, and it was honestly worse than if they'd just been upfront about it from the start. Apparently, they had decided they wanted to go with a different rental, a bigger house, a different town. They'd basically planned a completely different trip without me, and they hadn't invited me to the new version. I asked why I wasn't in the new chat, why nobody had talked to me about changing things. What was the actual reason they didn't want me coming? The explanations were weak and contradictory. One person said they thought I'd be too busy with work. I'd literally already requested the time off. They'd seen my request. Another person said they thought maybe I preferred to stay home. I had been the one most excited about this the entire time. Someone else tried to say it just happened organically and they didn't think about it. That one probably hurt the most. I had spent hours, actual hours of my free time planning this thing, and it just happened organically to plan a new version without me. I realized I wasn't being downgraded to a side role. I was just being left behind entirely. They were going on the trip without me. They had already booked the new house, money had changed hands, and nobody had even bothered to tell me directly. I didn't yell at them. I didn't blow up the group chat. I just said, "Cool, well, I guess I hope you guys have a good trip," and I left the conversation. I cancelled the original rental house. I ate the cancellation fee because I was too angry and hurt to even fight about it, and I didn't talk to most of those people for about 3 months. What got me wasn't even that they didn't want me on the trip. People change their minds. Plans shift. That happens. What got me was that they let me do all this work, stayed friendly about it, and then just replaced me. And none of them had the guts to actually tell me they didn't want me there anymore. They just went around me. And the worst part? When we finally talked about it months later, they acted confused about why I was so upset. Like I was being dramatic about them excluding me. One of them said, "We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. We just wanted a smaller group." A smaller group that you definitely could have mentioned before I did 4 hours of research and booked a house and coordinated everyone's schedules. Yeah, that's where I'm at with this one. I'm genuinely just moving on to the next story because I need to talk about something else that'll make your blood boil. Alright, so this next one's about workplace betrayal at its finest. You know that moment when someone you thought had your back completely throws you under the bus? Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here. So I've been working at this marketing agency for about 3 years now, and I'd say I'm pretty good at what I do. I show up, I do my work, I get along with most people. There's this guy, let's call him my co-worker, who started about a year ago in the same department as me. We weren't best friends or anything, but we collaborated on projects pretty regularly and seemed to have a solid working relationship. Or at least, I thought we did. About 2 months ago, we got assigned this huge client project together. It was a rebrand for a mid-sized tech company, and it was supposed to be a big deal for the agency. The kind of project that gets noticed by the higher-ups. My co-worker and I split the responsibilities. He handled the visual design concepts, and I was in charge of the messaging strategy and client communication. We had weekly check-ins, shared all our progress, and honestly, I thought we were doing pretty well. Here's the thing though, about halfway through the project, there was this disconnect between his design direction and my messaging strategy. They just didn't align. The designs were going one direction, and the messaging I'd developed was going another. It wasn't anyone's fault necessarily. Sometimes that just happens when you're working on different aspects of the same thing. We both recognized it in one of our meetings, and we agreed we needed to realign everything before presenting to the client. We decided together that we'd both make adjustments. He said he'd modify some of the visual direction to better match the tone I was going for, and I said I'd tweak the messaging to be more flexible with whatever he came up with design-wise. We were being collaborative, or so I thought. I made significant changes to my work, completely rewrote sections, adjusted the overall tone. I did my part. The day before our big presentation to the client and our boss, my co-worker sent over his revised designs. And I'm looking at them thinking, this doesn't match what we talked about at all. They were basically the same as before. He'd barely changed anything. So I sent him a message saying we need to talk before tomorrow because the strategy and design still don't line up. He said he was busy that night and we'd figure it out in the morning before the meeting. I didn't sleep much that night. I was stressed about how this was going to look. I knew the client would notice the disconnect, and I knew our boss would too. So I woke up early and I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but I thought it was necessary. I adjusted my strategy one more time, really stripped it down and made it more neutral so it could work with pretty much any design direction. I basically contorted my messaging to fit around his design instead of the other way around. We get into the conference room. Our boss is there and the client is there. My co-worker starts presenting the design work. It looks good, I'll give him that. The client seems impressed. Then it's my turn. I present the messaging strategy, and honestly, it felt weak. I knew it was weak because I'd had to water it down to make it work with designs that didn't actually align with what we'd discussed. Our boss, who's usually pretty quiet during these presentations, asks a few questions. And then he says something like, I'm a little surprised by how safe this messaging is. It doesn't feel as bold as what we usually do, and it feels disconnected from the design aesthetic. What happened here? That's when my co-worker jumps in. And I still remember exactly what he said, because I've replayed this moment about 1,000 times. He says, yeah, I noticed that too. Honestly, I think there was some miscommunication on the strategy side. I kept sending over my design directions, expecting the messaging to adapt, but it seemed like the messaging wasn't responding to the feedback I was giving. I tried to work with it, but I felt like I was left to move forward on my own. I'm sitting there completely stunned. First of all, that's not what happened. Second of all, he's making it sound like I dropped the ball and didn't communicate, when we both knew that we'd made an agreement, and he was the one who didn't follow through on his side. I tried to respond. I said something like, actually, we discussed this and agreed we'd both make adjustments. I did adjust significantly, but we didn't get a chance to fully coordinate before the meeting this morning. I was trying to be professional about it, but I could feel my face getting hot and my voice getting tighter. My co-worker just shook his head and said, I don't think that's really accurate. I communicated my direction multiple times. He was lying. He was straight up lying, and he was doing it so calmly and confidently that for a second I wondered if I was the crazy one. The client didn't really know what was going on, but they could definitely sense the tension. Our boss just moved on, thanked us both, and said he'd debrief with us after the meeting. The rest of the presentation was awkward. The client ended up being lukewarm on the whole thing, which I genuinely think wouldn't have happened if the strategy and design had actually worked together. After the client left, my boss pulled me aside. He said he was disappointed because he'd expected better execution from both of us, but especially from me on the strategy side. He said it seemed like I hadn't been paying attention to the design direction. I tried to explain what actually happened, but at that point, the damage was done. My co-worker had already planted this seed that I wasn't responsive and wasn't collaborating. The worst part? My co-worker avoided me for like 2 weeks after that. And when we did interact, he acted like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just thrown me completely under the bus to protect his own image. I ended up getting a mediocre review on that project. My co-worker didn't. And while our boss eventually moved on to other projects, I felt like that incident coloured how he saw me for months afterward. It took me a long time to rebuild that professional reputation, and the whole thing just left me feeling completely betrayed and humiliated. Man, that's the kind of thing that would keep me up at night for weeks. The fact that he just lied so smoothly and with such confidence and didn't even have the decency to acknowledge it afterward. That's brutal. And you're right there in front of your boss and the client, completely blindsided, trying to defend yourself in real time. That's such a helpless position to be in. Speaking of getting left out to dry, let me tell you about this next story. All right, so this next story is about someone who learned the hard way that a handshake agreement isn't worth the paper it's not written on. And trust me, once you hear what happened, you'll understand why having everything in writing actually matters, even with people you think you can trust. So I was looking for an apartment, and I wasn't having much luck on my own. Prices were insane, and everything decent was either out of my budget or already rented by the time I applied. I was getting frustrated, honestly. I'd been searching for like 3 months straight, and I was starting to think I'd have to move back in with my parents, which was not happening. Then my friend reached out and asked if I wanted to split a 2-bedroom apartment with him. His name's Cole. We'd known each other since sophomore year of college, and we got along great. I mean, we'd been friends for almost a decade at that point. We'd never lived together, but I figured if we could survive road trips together, we could handle sharing an apartment. We found a decent place in a decent neighbourhood. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, the landlord seemed cool, and the price split between the two of us was actually manageable. We went to see it on a Tuesday afternoon, and we both agreed on the spot that we wanted it. The landlord said we could move in within 2 weeks if we got everything sorted. I felt relieved, honestly. Finally, something was going right. Here's where things get murky. Cole said he'd handle the lease stuff since he was better with paperwork and admin things. I know. That's the mistake right there, but I didn't see it at the time. I genuinely thought he meant we'd both be on it. I assumed that was just how leases worked. You live there, you're on the lease. That's the rule, right? Wrong. I asked Cole how much the deposit was and what my half would be. He told me it was $2,000 total, so $1,000 each. Fair enough. He said the landlord wanted the deposit up front before we could sign anything, which made sense. So I transferred him $1,000 through Venmo with a note that said, "Deposit for apartment." I still have that transaction sitting there in my history. He said he was going to go by the landlord's office the next day with both our deposits to get everything finalised. A week went by, and I didn't really think about it. We were both busy preparing for the move. I started packing, got some boxes from my workplace, made a list of things I'd need to buy. Cole and I texted about move-in dates and whether we should buy a couch together. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. 2 weeks later, we got the keys and moved in on the same day. I brought my stuff, he brought his stuff, and we settled into our new place. Our first night there, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor like idiots, because neither of us had furniture yet. I genuinely felt grateful. I'd finally found a place and I had a good friend as a roommate. It seemed perfect. About 3 months in, I needed to check something about the lease. I can't even remember what it was now. Something small about the building's parking policy or something. I asked Cole if I could see a copy of the lease, so I could look something up. He got really quiet. I remember his whole demeanour just shifted. He said, "Yeah, about that. I should probably tell you something." My stomach dropped immediately. Nothing good ever comes after someone says, "I should probably tell you something." Turns out Cole had only put his name on the lease, just his name. Mine wasn't there at all, not even as an occupant. He was the sole leaseholder, and I was essentially, what, a guest? A squatter? I genuinely don't know what legal term applies here. I asked him why he hadn't told me, and his excuse was pathetic. He said the landlord had suggested that having one person on the lease would make the process faster and easier. He didn't want to complicate things by adding a second name. And here's the crazy part. He claimed he thought I'd just ask about it eventually, and he was planning to tell me when the time was right. The time was never going to be right, apparently, because he never planned to mention it at all. I only found out because I needed to check the lease myself. I was furious. I felt betrayed. Not only had I paid $1,000 that was supposed to cover my security deposit, but I had zero legal standing in this apartment. If something happened, if there was a problem, if he decided to kick me out tomorrow, I'd have no recourse. I was completely vulnerable. And worse, I was trapped. I'd already unpacked all my stuff. I'd committed to a lease term that I wasn't even on. I confronted him about it that night. I asked him directly if this was some kind of scam, if he was planning to take my deposit and use it for himself or something. He got defensive and said of course that wasn't it, that he was just trying to help us both, that it made things simpler. Simpler for who, exactly? I asked him if my name could be added to the lease, and he said he'd talk to the landlord about it. That was months ago. He keeps saying he'll ask, but he never actually does it. Every time I bring it up, there's some reason why now isn't a good time. The landlord is busy. The lease is already signed. It would be complicated to amend it. We'll do it when it's time to renew. We'll handle it next month. Next month never comes. I've tried to look into my own legal options, but apparently I don't have many. I paid money toward a deposit for a place I have no legal claim to. My name isn't on any paperwork. If the landlord wanted to evict me, they'd have to go through Cole. And honestly, Cole's probably the only reason I'm still here at all. It's not like the landlord even knows I exist in any official capacity. The worst part is that Cole acts like I'm overreacting. He's like, "We're friends, man. You're overthinking this. You live here, it's fine." But it's not fine. It's not fine at all. I'm living in an apartment with absolutely zero legal protection. I could lose my deposit with no way to get it back. I could get kicked out with no notice. I'm completely at Cole's mercy, and somehow he doesn't see why that's a problem. I've started looking for a new place because I can't keep living like this. I'm not comfortable in my own apartment anymore. Every conversation with Cole feels tense now. I don't trust him, and I've lost $1,000 with no way to recover it. Best case scenario, when I move out, he gives me my money back. Worst case scenario, he keeps it, and there's nothing I can do about it because there's no paper trail proving it was ever supposed to be a deposit rather than just money I lent him. I guess the lesson here is don't trust anyone with money, even friends. Get everything in writing. Get your name on official documents. Don't assume people have your best interests in mind, because apparently, even people you've known for a decade will screw you over without even thinking twice about it. Alright, so this next one is about what happens when someone explicitly asks you to be honest and then absolutely loses it when you actually are. It's one of those situations where you can't win no matter what you do. Let's dive in. So I've had this friend, let's call him Marcus. Actually, no, wait, I can't use that name. Let's call him Connor. I've known Connor for about 7 years. We met in college, stayed close after graduation, hung out regularly, grabbed drinks, the whole thing. He was one of those friends who actually felt like a brother. You know, the kind where you could talk about anything and you knew they'd always have your back. Or at least, I thought that's what we had. About 8 months ago, Connor started dating this woman named Amber. And look, I tried to be supportive. That's what you do for your friends. But pretty quickly, it became obvious to everyone around him, his other friends, his family, literally anyone with eyes, that this relationship was not good. She was controlling. She'd check his phone constantly. She'd make comments about his weight, his career choices, his friendships. She'd isolate him from us, making excuses for why he couldn't come out, or why he had to leave early from hangouts. It was toxic, plain and simple. His sister pulled him aside at one point and said something. His parents expressed concern. We all did. Carefully and with love, because we genuinely cared about him. But Connor kept defending her. He'd say we didn't understand her, that we were being judgmental, that she was actually really sweet once you got to know her. Which, spoiler alert, she was not. Then one night, and this is important, Connor texted me out of the blue. He said he needed to talk to someone he trusted, someone who would be completely honest with him. He said he was confused about the relationship and needed my perspective as someone who knew him well and cared about him. He explicitly said he wanted the truth, no sugarcoating, no holding back. He said he couldn't figure out what was real anymore, and he needed someone to just tell him straight up what I thought. So we met up for coffee the next day. I remember sitting across from him, really thinking about how to do this. I wasn't trying to be mean. I was trying to be helpful. And he kept asking me direct questions. Does she seem controlling? Do you think she's good for me? Do you think I've changed since we started dating? Am I being stupid for staying with her? And I answered him honestly. I said yes, she does seem controlling, and I gave him specific examples of things we'd witnessed. I told him that yes, he had changed, that he wasn't as happy or as social as he used to be. I said that the relationship seemed one-sided and that I didn't think she treated him with respect. I told him I was worried about him. But I also made sure to say that ultimately the choice was his and that I'd support whatever he decided. He nodded along while I was talking. He asked clarifying questions. He seemed like he was actually listening and processing what I was saying. I felt like I was helping my friend. We talked for over an hour, and by the end he said he appreciated my honesty and that it meant a lot to him that I cared enough to tell him the truth. I left that coffee shop feeling good about it. I felt like I'd done the right thing as a friend. Then nothing, and I mean nothing. 3 days later, Connor blocked me on Instagram. Not unfollowed, straight up blocked. A week later, I noticed he'd unfriended me on Facebook. I tried texting him, asking if everything was okay, if I'd said something wrong. The messages went through, but he never responded. I called him once. It went to voicemail, and I left a message apologising if I'd hurt him, saying I just wanted to talk about it. He never called back. Over the next couple months, I found out through mutual friends what had happened. Apparently, he'd gone back to Amber and told her everything I said. She flipped out naturally. She turned it into this whole thing about how his friends didn't respect her and how I was trying to sabotage their relationship. And instead of defending his friends or recognising that maybe there was some truth to what we'd all said, Connor just sided with her, completely cut ties. I've seen him once since all that at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was there with Amber and he actively avoided me the entire night. When I tried to approach him to say hi, he literally walked away. Amber was smirking the whole time. It was humiliating. The worst part is that he asked me for honesty. He explicitly said he needed someone to tell him the truth because he was confused. And when I did exactly what he asked, when I was careful and loving and honest, he turned it into this reason to end our friendship. Like I didn't betray his confidence. I didn't tell other people his business. I just answered his direct questions with the truth he asked for. Last I heard through the grapevine, he's still with Amber. I hope things work out for him. I really do, but I also can't help feeling like I got punished for caring about him. That's the thing that gets me about this whole situation. Sometimes people don't actually want honesty. They want validation. They ask for the truth when what they really want is for you to tell them what they want to hear. And when you don't give them that, you become the villain somehow. Man, that's rough. So Connor asked for complete honesty, got it, and then ghosted him for giving him exactly what he asked for. That's the kind of situation where you literally cannot win. It's like he wanted permission to keep doing what he was already doing, not actual advice. Alright, so this next one hits a little different. It's about someone who found out something really hurtful during what should have been a happy time of year. Grab your drink, because this is the kind of thing that just sits with you. I don't even know where to start with this, honestly. It's been a few weeks and I'm still processing it all. My family and I have always done holidays together. It's kind of our thing, you know. We live in the same area, we see each other regularly, and around November we usually start planning where we're going to go for Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's a tradition I actually really valued. I work a demanding job in IT, and those holidays were something I looked forward to all year. Time with my family, getting away from work stress, just existing in the same space without any distractions. This year, I had actually cleared my schedule early. Back in September, I'd told my parents and my 2 siblings that I had major projects ending in October and November, so I'd be fully available for the holidays. No emergencies, no work calls, no last-minute obligations. I was excited about it. I had already mentioned some ideas for where we could go, places I thought we'd all enjoy. My mum had seemed into it, or at least I thought she had been. The thing is, I'm not the most outgoing person. I work a lot, I focus on my career, and I'm not one of those people who's constantly making plans or inserting myself into group conversations. I'm just kind of quiet and do my own thing. I think sometimes my family forgets I'm even there, if I'm being honest. But I still love them, and I still want to be part of their life. I just don't always make a big deal about it. So here's where it all went wrong. I was sitting at work one afternoon, and my mum texted me asking about what I wanted for my birthday. My birthday is in early December, right before the holidays really kick into gear. I told her I didn't really need anything, just wanted to spend time with the family. She responded with something like, "Well, we'll see how that works out," which was a weird response, but I didn't think much of it at the time. A few days later, I was on my company's Slack channel, and I got distracted, like you do. I was scrolling through my phone waiting for a meeting to start, and I noticed my family group chat had gotten pretty active, like a ton of messages. I opened it up out of curiosity, and that's when my stomach just completely dropped. My siblings had apparently been planning a big holiday trip, a full 2-week thing, flights, hotel, the whole setup. They were discussing dates, activities, what to pack, making jokes about past trips. It was detailed, it was excited, it was everything you'd expect from a family planning something together. There was absolutely nothing about me in that conversation. I just sat there for a minute, reading through these messages. My sister had sent photos of the Airbnb they'd already booked. My brother was joking about how they have finally had enough money to do something nice this year. My parents were talking about the flights they'd already purchased. And the dates? They'd chosen dates that would have worked perfectly for me. They had known about my availability. I'd literally told them weeks ago. I felt sick, like actually physically nauseous. I called my mum immediately. I tried to keep my voice level, but I could feel it shaking a little. I asked her why I hadn't been included in the group chat about the holiday plans. There was this long pause, and then she said something that I'll never forget. She said, "Oh honey, we didn't think you'd want to go. You're always so busy with work, and we didn't want to pressure you into doing something you couldn't commit to." I reminded her that I'd told her 2 months ago that I was completely clear for the holidays. I'd mentioned it multiple times. I'd even suggested places we could go. I asked her why she hadn't just asked me instead of assuming, and she got quiet. She said they'd already planned it, already booked everything, and they didn't want to mess up what they had. She said maybe I could join them later if my schedule worked out, which was just patronising at that point. I hung up after that. I wasn't angry in that moment, I was just confused and hurt. Like, how do you plan a family holiday trip and not include a family member? How do you assume someone doesn't want to be included without asking them first? I called my dad later that night, thinking maybe he'd have a different explanation. He basically said the same thing, but added that I'd always seemed content doing my own thing, so they figured I wouldn't mind. He said they didn't mean anything by it. It was just easier to plan without coordinating with me. Easier. That word just stuck with me. It was easier to plan without me. My siblings were a bit more sympathetic when I reached out, but they said they'd assumed I wouldn't want to go since I hadn't been in the original conversations. Which makes sense if I'd never been included in the first place, but that just kind of made it worse. No one had even mentioned it to me. No one had said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this, want to come?" Nothing. I told my family I wouldn't be joining them. They pushed back a little, said they'd figure out how to make it work, but honestly, I didn't want to be an afterthought on a trip. I didn't want to be the person who was added on at the last minute out of obligation. And I didn't want to spend 2 weeks with people who assumed I'd rather be alone than with them. The holidays happened. They went on their trip. I stayed home and worked, which was depressing in its own way. They sent photos to the group chat that I'm still in. They looked like they had an amazing time. When I asked my mum how it went, she said it was great and that they'd really missed me, but apparently not enough to actually invite me in the first place. I think what hurts the most is realising that my family doesn't actually value my presence the way I value theirs. I've always been the quiet one, the one who doesn't make a fuss, the one who's easy to forget. And I guess I finally got confirmation that yeah, I am easy to forget. To them at least. Man, that one just hits different. The assumption that someone doesn't want to be around because they're quiet or independent without actually asking them is so incredibly frustrating. Like, they literally chose convenience over including a family member and then acted hurt when he set a boundary. That's wild. Hope he found people who actually want him around for the holidays this year. Alright, so this next one is about someone who started to see through a pattern that their boss was absolutely counting on them not noticing. And honestly, once you catch on to something like this, you can't unsee it. Here's Caleb's story. I've been working at this marketing firm for about 4 years now, and I've watched my boss do something that's honestly infuriating once you realise what's happening. Her name is Rachel, and she's always been this big advocate for teamwork. Like, genuinely can't stop talking about it. Every all-hands meeting, she's up there talking about how our strength comes from collaboration, how we're only as strong as our team, how the best ideas come from people working together. She even has a wall in the office that says, "Together we rise," in this big inspirational font. It's everywhere. Part of my job is actually really rewarding because of this teamwork focus. I work in a small team with 2 other people, and we genuinely collaborate on everything. We brainstorm together, we execute together, we celebrate wins together. The 3 of us have built something solid, and I was under the impression that's what Rachel wanted. But about 2 years in, I started noticing something weird. Whenever promotions came around, it wasn't the collaborators getting bumped up, it was the solo players. There was this guy, Michael, who worked in the same department as me. He never really collaborated with anyone. He'd come in, do his own thing, barely showed up to team meetings, and would send emails with his accomplishments, highlighted like he was preparing a trophy reel. And when the senior manager position opened up, Michael got it. Rachel literally announced it in a meeting right after talking about how much she values teamwork. And I remember thinking, wait, what? But I figured maybe I was missing something. Maybe there were other factors I didn't know about. Then it happened again. Another promotion, another solo operator. This time, it was a woman named Christine who worked in a different team. She was known for being difficult to work with, honestly. People didn't want to collaborate with her because she'd take credit for the whole thing. But she kept getting visibility because she was always highlighting her individual contributions. And then suddenly she's being promoted to team lead. Meanwhile, my team and I are churning out incredible work together, and none of us are getting called out or promoted. That's when I started paying closer attention. I went back through every promotion in the last 3 years. Rachel had promoted 6 people total. Of those 6, 5 of them were people who primarily worked independently and made sure everyone knew about their accomplishments. The one person who did get promoted, who had been collaborative, they had spent the last 6 months before the promotion completely switching gears, taking solo projects and making sure their name was attached to everything. It was like they figured out the game and started playing it. I remember feeling this twist in my stomach when I realised what was actually happening. Rachel didn't want teamwork. She wanted to talk about teamwork. She wanted the optics of teamwork. She wanted her team to function smoothly, with good communication, so the work got done. But when it came time to reward people, she only saw the individuals who'd positioned themselves as the stars. All her speeches about collaboration and rising together, they were just noise to cover up a system that punished people for being team players. Here's the thing that really got me though. I brought this up to my team. I called a meeting with my 2 collaborators and I laid out what I'd noticed. I showed them the pattern. I told them I thought we'd been approaching this all wrong, that we'd been buying into Rachel's teamwork narrative while she was literally only promoting people who ignored that narrative. My teammates were quiet for a while. Then one of them, Patricia, said, "So what do we do? Stop collaborating?" And I said, "No, I think we need to change how we present ourselves. We keep doing the work together because that's genuinely better work. But when it comes time to showcase it, we can't just let it be a team thing anymore. We need to make sure we're individually visible." It felt gross saying it out loud, but it was true. So we changed our approach. We still collaborated behind the scenes, but we started documenting our individual contributions. When we had team wins, we'd each highlight the specific part we'd owned. In meetings, instead of saying, "Our team did this," we started saying, "I worked on this part, and here's why it matters." We even started taking projects solo sometimes, not because we wanted to, but because we knew that's what got noticed. And you know what? It worked. Within the next promotion cycle, I got bumped up. So did Patricia. Our third teammate is still working on the transition, to be honest, because he's the type who really does believe in pure collaboration, and he's struggling with what feels like a betrayal of that. But Rachel, she gave her usual speech about teamwork at the promotion announcements while promoting people for being individuals. She literally couldn't see the contradiction. The worst part is that I don't even feel good about the promotion. I got it. I'm making more money now. But I resent Rachel for creating an environment where this was necessary. I resent that I had to change how I work and present myself just to get recognized. And I resent that the most honest approach, just being a good team player, was the one that would have left me invisible. The system she created rewards deception, basically. It rewards people who can talk the talk about collaboration while walking the walk of self-promotion. It's toxic, and she doesn't even realize she's the one who made it that way. I'm still looking for a new job, honestly, because I don't want to work somewhere where I have to play games like this. I don't want to be suspicious of my teammates' intentions or constantly calculating whether I'm getting enough individual credit. But I learned an important lesson about what leaders actually value versus what they say they value. And the two things are almost never the same. Okay, so Caleb figured out the game, played it, and won, but ended up losing respect for the whole system in the process. That's honestly worse than just being passed over, because at least then you can blame external circumstances. This is Rachel literally engineering a culture of fake collaboration while only rewarding the people willing to ditch the actual collaboration part. It's the kind of thing that makes you realize your boss doesn't actually understand her own workplace. Alright, so this next story is about someone who learned the hard way that lending something to a roommate doesn't always mean you're getting it back. And I mean that literally. Here's what happened. I lent my roommate my bike a few weeks ago. It wasn't a huge deal at first. He asked if he could borrow it for the weekend to ride around the neighborhood, and I said sure. I had another bike I could use, and it seemed like a simple, straightforward thing. My bike was nice though. Nothing crazy expensive, but I'd spent time finding the right one. It was a solid Trek hybrid, probably worth around $1,200. I'd had it for about 4 years and took decent care of it. The tyres were good, the gears worked smoothly, and it was just comfortable to ride. I wasn't using it that particular weekend anyway, so lending it to him seemed harmless enough. The weekend came and went. He returned it on Sunday evening, said thanks, everything was good. I didn't think anything of it. But then Monday rolled around and he asked again. Could he borrow it for a few more days? He said he was thinking about getting into biking and wanted to really test mine out before he decided to buy his own. That made sense to me. I figured he was genuinely interested in the hobby and wanted to make sure it was something he'd actually stick with. I told him fine, keep it for the week, bring it back next Sunday. That Sunday came. No bike. I asked him where it was and he kind of brushed it off, said he was still testing it out, asked if he could keep it a bit longer. At this point, I was starting to get a little annoyed, but I didn't want to be a jerk about it. We lived together, and I didn't want to create tension over something that should have been a temporary thing. I told him he needed to bring it back by the end of the week though. I had plans to ride it over to a friend's house. Thursday evening, I asked him again, "Where's the bike?" He got kind of quiet and said we needed to talk. My stomach dropped a little because I already had a bad feeling about where this was going. He sat down and explained that he'd been thinking, and he actually sold the bike. He said he had a friend who was really interested in it, and they made a deal. He sold it for $800. $800. That's what he thought my bike was worth, and he just went ahead and sold it without asking me, without even telling me first, just straight up sold my property. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him what the hell he was thinking, and he genuinely seemed confused about why I was upset. In his mind, it was no big deal. He said the money was just sitting there if I wanted it. He could give me half or something. He tried to make it sound like he was doing me a favour, like he'd unlocked some hidden value in my bike, but that completely missed the point. It wasn't about the money. It was my bike. I lent it to him temporarily, and he made a unilateral decision to sell it without my permission. That's not his decision to make. I told him that wasn't how this works. You can't just sell someone else's property. That's theft, basically. Sure, we lived together, and we had a casual arrangement, but it doesn't matter. It's not his bike. He argued that he thought I didn't really care about it that much, that I had another bike, so why was I making such a big deal about it? The logic there is just baffling. Just because I had another option didn't mean he could dispose of mine. That's like saying if someone has 2 cars, you can just give one away because they won't miss it. We went back and forth for a while. I asked him who he sold it to and demanded he get it back. He said the guy who bought it had already ridden it a bunch and wasn't going to return it. I asked for the buyer's contact information so I could try to track the bike down myself. He refused at first, said it would be weird to go behind his back like that. I told him that ship had sailed the moment he sold my bike without permission. He finally gave me a name and phone number, but when I reached out to the buyer, the guy was completely unhelpful. He said he bought it in good faith and wasn't going to give it back. He had no way of knowing it wasn't actually the roommate's to sell. That's when I started looking into my actual options. Could I take my roommate to small claims court? Technically, yes, but it would be messy. We lived together, and even if I won, it's not like he could pull $1,200 out of thin air. He'd probably just move out and ghost me. Could I report it as stolen? The police made it pretty clear that since it was a roommate I'd knowingly lent it to, they wouldn't get involved in what they saw as a civil dispute. I was stuck. The bike was gone, the money was spent, and there wasn't a legal avenue that made sense. What bothered me most was that he didn't see the violation in what he'd done. In his mind, he'd made a spontaneous decision that inconvenienced me financially, and that was just something that happened. He didn't apologise. He didn't offer to replace it. He offered me half of the money he made, which was insulting. I didn't lend him a bike so he could flip it for profit and keep a chunk of the proceeds. That's not how borrowing works. We had a really uncomfortable couple of weeks living together after that. I wasn't angry in that explosive way. I was angry in that cold, quiet way where you just can't look at someone the same anymore. I stopped lending him anything. I stopped helping him out with small stuff, and after about a month, he moved out. He got a place with some other friends, and honestly, I think he was relieved. The tension had gotten too thick, and he probably knew he'd crossed a line, even if he never admitted it. The worst part is that I'll never know if he actually had remorse, or if he just wanted to escape the awkwardness. He never brought it up again, never tried to make it right. He just left. And that was it. I lost a bike and a roommate situation that had been pretty decent up until that point, all because he thought it was okay to sell something that wasn't his. Yeah, that's completely wild. You lend someone something in good faith, and they just decide that gives them the right to sell it and pocket the cash. The fact that he didn't even see it as a betrayal is somehow the most frustrating part. Like, the audacity isn't even self-aware enough to feel bad about it. This is the kind of thing that makes you question how someone's brain actually works. Alright, so this next one is about workplace betrayal. And honestly, it's the kind of situation that makes you feel completely helpless because you're literally innocent, but nobody believes you. Let me tell you what happened to this guy. So I work at a marketing firm downtown, and we're a pretty tight-knit team of about 8 people. The environment's usually pretty collaborative, and I thought I had solid relationships with everyone. I'd been there for almost 3 years. I knew the systems inside and out, and I was good at what I did. My boss, Richard, seemed to respect my work, or at least I thought he did. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when I walked into the office and immediately sensed something was off. There was this weird tension in the air. People weren't making eye contact with me. My co-worker, Daniel, actually looked away when I came in. I had no idea what was happening, but my stomach already felt tight. Within 5 minutes, Richard called me into his office. He closed the door, which was never a good sign, and told me to sit down. He pulled up his monitor and showed me a spreadsheet, one of the main files we use to track client account information and billing. There was a massive problem. Someone had deleted an entire section of data from a major client's account. Not just deleted it either. The changes had been made in a way that could have caused serious billing issues if the client had noticed. Richard looked furious, but what he said next made my blood run cold. He told me I had done it. He said the access logs showed someone from my account had made the changes on Monday afternoon. I remember just staring at him. Monday afternoon. And I had to tell him that I wasn't even at work on Monday. I'd taken a personal day. I had a doctor's appointment in the morning, and then I spent the rest of the day running errands and handling some stuff at home. I even showed him my calendar, where I'd marked the day off weeks in advance. But Richard's expression didn't change. He said the system doesn't lie, and the logs clearly showed my credentials being used. I tried to explain that my credentials could have been used, but that meant someone else had either gotten my password or used my login somehow. I asked him to check the actual login location, the IP address, anything that would show it wasn't me at my desk because I wasn't even in the building. He said he'd look into it, but the way he said it, I could tell he'd already made up his mind. I left that office feeling completely panicked. This was serious. Deleting client data wasn't a small mistake. This was the kind of thing that could get someone fired. And I was the one being accused. I spent the rest of that day trying to figure out what happened. I went through the files trying to piece together how this could have occurred. And here's the thing, I was almost certain I knew who had done it. There's this guy, Marcus, who sits near me and definitely has the technical knowledge to pull something like this off. He's always been a little slimy, kind of competitive, and he'd made some comments before about how the client was annoying and how their accounts were a mess anyway. Plus, I'd noticed he sometimes worked late when most people had gone home, but I didn't have proof. I just had suspicion. The next morning, I went back to Richard with a formal request. I asked him to please pull the full login data, not just the access logs showing my account, but the IP address, the device used, the exact timestamps, everything. I said if someone had access to my credentials, there would be a way to trace where they actually were when the access happened. It should have been simple. It should have taken him literally 30 minutes to pull that data from IT. He told me he didn't think that was necessary. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was being blamed for something I didn't do. I was offering a way to prove my innocence, and he was refusing to actually investigate. I asked him why, and he said because he wanted to give me a chance to explain myself. But the evidence was pretty clear. The evidence being my account was used. That was it. He wasn't interested in anything more nuanced than that. What really got to me was the silence from my team. These were people I'd worked with for years, people I'd gotten lunch with, helped on their projects, covered for when they needed time off, and not a single one of them came forward. I knew at least 2 people who would have known the truth or could have provided context about who was actually in the office that day. Daniel definitely knew. He was here late that Monday, but he said nothing. Nobody said anything. Within a week, Richard announced that there would be a review process and that I was being put on a performance improvement plan. Not suspended, but basically watched constantly. My reputation just tanked. People started treating me differently. The few times someone from another department came by, I could see them whispering. The client found out eventually that their data had been deleted, and Richard had to eat that conversation, but he still didn't actually investigate properly. He just told them it had been a user error on our end, and that we'd implemented new safeguards. I stayed in that job for another 4 months because I needed the health insurance and I was terrified that leaving would make me look guilty. But I was miserable. Every single day I'd come in and feel like I was working under a cloud of suspicion, and nobody ever came forward. Not after the fact, not when they had a chance to correct the record. Richard never actually ran those diagnostics I'd asked for, at least not that he ever told me about. The worst part is, I'll never know for certain if it was Marcus or someone else. And I'll never know if Richard was just lazy, incompetent, or if he actually believed I'd done it and just didn't care about the truth. But I do know that my reputation there was permanently damaged by someone else's actions and by my boss's complete unwillingness to actually do his job. So that's absolutely brutal. You're literally offering an easy way to prove your innocence, and your boss just decides not to take it because apparently checking facts is too much work. And your co-workers? Total ghosts. That's the part that gets to me. They knew, or they could have known, and they chose to stay quiet and watch you get railroaded. That's not a team. That's a group of people looking out for themselves. All right, so this next one is about something that happens way too often in relationships. And honestly, it's one of the most cowardly ways to back out of something. Here's a story about broken promises and the kind of betrayal that comes from someone choosing avoidance over a conversation. So I've been with my partner for about 3 years now. Things have been really good overall. We've talked about the future, about moving in together, about building something real. About 6 months ago, we had this conversation where we both agreed it was time. We were ready to take that step. We're both in our late 20s, we've been together long enough, and honestly, I was excited. Like genuinely excited about the idea of waking up to them every day, of building a life together instead of just visiting on weekends. We started looking at places together. This wasn't casual browsing either. We made a whole thing of it. We'd spend Sunday afternoons driving around neighbourhoods, going to open houses, making notes about what we liked and what we didn't. My partner seemed just as into it as I was. They'd text me links to apartments they found, saying things like, "Oh, imagine this kitchen," or "The light in this place is perfect." Sfoceri, I remember one time they got genuinely excited about a 2-bedroom with this amazing balcony and natural light. They were already talking about how we could decorate it, where we'd put the couch, stuff like that. We had basically narrowed it down to 3 places we were seriously considering. We'd even talked to a realtor about getting pre-approved for a lease together. Everything felt like it was moving forward. My parents knew about it. My friends knew about it. I even started mentally preparing myself for the move, looking forward to this new chapter. And then completely out of nowhere, my partner just didn't bring it up anymore. I noticed they'd stopped sending me apartment links. They'd get a little vague when I'd try to talk about timelines or next steps. I figured maybe they were just busy with work or needed a minute to think about it, so I didn't push. I gave them space. But in the back of my mind, I was getting this gnawing feeling that something was off. Then one night, we're hanging out at their place and they get a call. It's their landlord. They answer and start having this conversation about renewing their lease, about signing paperwork, about their move-in date for the next year. And I'm just sitting there listening, getting colder by the second. When they hung up, I just asked them straight up, "Wait, are you renewing your lease?" There was this moment of silence where they just looked at me, and I could see it in their face. They knew they were caught. They said, yeah, they had renewed it. They'd actually done it like 2 weeks prior. 2 weeks. And they never told me. I couldn't even process it at first. I asked them why they didn't tell me, and their explanation was basically that they wanted to think about things, and they didn't want to rush into moving in together. But here's the thing that really got me. They had the time to renew their lease without discussing it with me, but they couldn't find the time to have the conversation about why they wanted to pump the brakes on us moving in together. They kept saying things like, I wasn't sure we were ready and I needed more time to figure things out. I asked them why they didn't just say that instead of going apartment hunting with me, letting me get excited and then secretly renewing their lease. Their response was that they didn't want to disappoint me, so they thought maybe if they took some time it would all work out. But by doing it that way, they ended up disappointing me way worse. What really messed with my head was the dishonesty of it. It wasn't just that they changed their mind. People do that, and it's okay to have doubts. It was that they couldn't just talk to me about it. Instead, they let me sit there planning this future that they had already decided wasn't happening. They let me feel excited and hopeful while they were going behind my back renewing their lease. They made me look naive. I kept asking if there was something else going on, if they were losing feelings or if I'd done something wrong. but they kept saying it was just about timing, about not being sure. I told them that if they had just communicated with me, we could have worked through it together. We could have figured out if it was a timing thing or something bigger. Instead, they chose to run and hide. And now, I'm sitting here wondering if I can actually trust them. The worst part is that I can't unsee this. I can't just move forward like it didn't happen. Because now every time they say they want to do something or they promise something, there's this voice in my head asking if they actually mean it or if they're just going to do whatever they want and not tell me until they get caught. We've talked about it a few times since, and they keep apologizing and saying they feel terrible. But apologies don't fix the fact that they looked me in the eye during apartment tours and acted like they were on board while simultaneously renewing their solo lease. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. I don't know where this goes from here. I love them, but right now, I'm really struggling with whether love is enough when someone won't be honest with you. Even about the hard stuff. Okay, so that's absolutely brutal. Like the partner could have just said, "Hey, I'm not ready, let's table this conversation." And instead, they went full ghost mode and just renewed their lease like nothing was happening. That's not being thoughtful or careful with someone's feelings. That's just cowardice disguised as consideration. You can't have a future with someone who can't have a tough conversation with you. And the fact that they let this person keep planning and getting excited while actively working against it is really rough. Alright, so this next one is about friendship and feeling completely invisible when you've given everything to help someone succeed. And honestly, this one's going to sting a little bit because it's about someone who just wanted to support their friend and instead got completely erased from the story. Here we go. I've always been the type of person who likes to help out when someone's struggling. If a friend needs support, I'm there. So when my buddy reached out a few weeks before his big professional certification exam, I didn't hesitate. He'd been working full-time and felt completely overwhelmed trying to study on his own. The test was crucial for his career advancement, and he was genuinely terrified of failing. I told him I'd help him prepare, and we started planning out a study schedule. We decided to meet up 3 times a week for about 6 weeks leading up to the exam. I wasn't taking the test myself, but I have a pretty solid background in the subject matter, so I figured I could help him break down the material and quiz him on the tough concepts. Those 6 weeks were intense. I mean, I basically became a full-time tutor on top of my regular job. Every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, we'd meet up at my apartment after work and study for 2 to 3 hours at a time. I made flashcards, created practice tests, broke down complicated theories into digestible chunks, and explained things from like 5 different angles when he didn't get it the first time. I looked up supplementary resources, found YouTube videos that explained certain topics better, and even stayed up late the night before our sessions to prepare new study materials. When he was frustrated, I'd encourage him. When he didn't understand something, I'd reframe it and try again. I printed out full study guides. I made him take practice tests and graded them with detailed feedback on where he was getting stuck. He was working long hours at his job, so I didn't expect him to put in crazy effort outside our sessions, but I absolutely did my part. I was invested, like genuinely invested in seeing him succeed. By the 4th week, I could see his confidence growing. The concepts were starting to click. He was retaining information better. We refined his approach and focused on his weakest areas. I'd send him articles and resources between our sessions. I'd answer questions he texted me throughout the week. He'd call me panicking about certain topics, and I'd talk him through it. My entire social calendar basically revolved around making sure this guy was prepared. The night before his exam, I checked in with him. He was nervous but ready. I told him he was going to crush it, that I genuinely believed in him. He thanked me and said he couldn't have done this without my help. I meant it when I told him I was proud of him. He took the test the next day, and about a week later, he got his results. He passed. Not just passed, he got a really strong score. I was so happy for him. I called him immediately to celebrate, and he was thrilled. He said my studying with him had made all the difference. Everything was good, or so I thought. About 2 weeks after he passed, I'm at a work happy hour, and a mutual friend pulls me aside. She says, "Hey, congrats to your buddy on passing his certification, that's awesome." I say thanks and start talking about how much I'd helped him prepare. And she kind of looks at me weird and says, "Oh, well, that's not really what he's been telling people." My stomach drops. I ask what she means. She tells me that apparently my friend has been going around telling people he studied completely on his own and aced the exam because he'd been grinding super hard independently. No mention of me. No mention of the 6 weeks of sessions. No mention of the study materials I'd created. Nothing. I couldn't believe it. I asked her if she was sure, and she said, yeah, she'd heard him tell this story at like 2 different gatherings. He was taking full credit and painting himself as this self-made success story. I felt this weird combination of hurt and anger building in my chest. Like, why would he do that? I wasn't looking for public praise or anything, but to completely erase my contribution and pretend he'd done it all alone felt like such a betrayal. I texted him that night, asking if we could talk. He called me, and I just came right out with it. I said, "I heard you've been telling people you studied for the exam completely on yourself, and that you did it all independently." There was this pause, and then he started backtracking. He said that wasn't totally accurate, that he had been studying on his own too, and that he didn't want to seem like he couldn't do things by himself. I told him that wasn't the point. The point was that he was straight up lying about my involvement. I'd spent 6 weeks helping him prepare. I'd created study materials. I'd given up nights with my girlfriend and friends to be his tutor. And he was going around telling people he'd done it solo. He got defensive. He said that he had put in effort too, which yeah, I know he had. But that's not the same as claiming you did something completely on your own when someone else was instrumental in your success. I asked him directly if he'd told people I helped him, and he said, "Well, I mentioned something about studying with friends, but I didn't want to make it seem like I couldn't handle it alone." Friends, plural? Like I was just one of a bunch of people casually studying with him, not the person who'd literally invested 6 weeks into helping him pass. The conversation went nowhere. He kept insisting he'd had to downplay my help to maintain his confidence, and I kept trying to explain that that wasn't my problem to solve. I didn't ask him to tell everyone I was the reason he passed. I just didn't expect him to actively rewrite history and pretend I'd never been involved. He eventually said he was sorry if I felt unappreciated, but the damage was done. I didn't feel unappreciated. I felt invisible, like all that time, all that energy, all those sessions where I genuinely wanted to see him succeed. It all just got deleted from the narrative. We haven't really talked since. I'm not angry anymore, just disappointed. And honestly, I'm way more hesitant to help people now. I know that sounds jaded, but it's hard not to be when you realise someone was comfortable completely erasing you from a story where you played a starring role. Wow, okay, so he basically took everything you did for him and rewrote the whole thing to make it about his own personal resilience. That's wild. Like you weren't even asking to be in the spotlight, just not actively deleted from it. The fact that he felt comfortable lying to mutual friends about something you literally spent 6 weeks on says everything. That's rough, man. Alright, so this next one is about someone who learned that a landlord's promise is apparently worth about as much as a handshake deal with a stranger at a bar. This story is frustrating because it's exactly the kind of thing that messes with your entire life plan. Let me get into it. Victor had been living in his apartment for about 3 years when his landlord, Tom, called him into the office one afternoon. Victor wasn't worried because he'd always paid rent on time, kept the place clean, and never caused any problems. He figured maybe Tom wanted to discuss something about the building or talk about a maintenance issue. But when he sat down, Tom got straight to the point. He said, "Look, I appreciate you as a tenant. You're reliable, you're quiet, and honestly, you're one of the few people in this building I don't have to chase down for rent. I'm locking in your rent for the next 2 years. It's not going up. Things are changing with the market, but you've been solid, so this is my way of saying thanks." Victor was genuinely relieved. He'd been worried about rent increases because he worked in freelance design, which meant his income fluctuated. Having that guarantee meant he could actually plan ahead. He could start saving money. He could breathe a little easier. Tom even said it casually, like it was no big deal for him either. They shook hands on it and Victor walked out, feeling like he'd actually caught a break in life. About 6 months after that conversation, Victor got offered a promotion at a design firm across town. It was a salaried position with benefits, something he'd been hoping for since he went freelance years ago. But the job came with a pay cut initially, something he'd have to accept while he proved himself in the role. Normally, that would have been a deal breaker, but because Tom had promised his rent would stay the same, Victor could afford to take the hit. He'd have stable income, health insurance, and a real career path. He turned down 2 other freelance gigs that would have paid better in the short term, but the salaried job felt like the right move because of that rental agreement. Victor gave notice to his freelance clients, packed up his home office setup, and started the new job. For the first 3 months, it was tight. Really tight. His salary was about 30% less than what he'd been making before, but he had a plan. He'd work at the firm for a year, prove his value, and move up. Once he got a raise, everything would balance out. The security of not having to worry about rent made this all possible. He'd made a major life decision based on that promise. Then about 2 months into his new job, Victor got an email from Tom. Not a call, not a conversation, an email. It said that Tom was raising rent effective immediately. The increase was $400 a month. Just like that. Victor read it 3 times thinking he'd misunderstood something. He called Tom right away. When Tom picked up, his tone was completely different from their previous conversations. He sounded almost defensive before Victor even said anything. Victor said, "Tom, I'm looking at this email about the rent increase. I thought we had an agreement that it would stay the same for 2 years. Tom's response was basically that the market changed, his property taxes went up, and he needed to raise rents across the board to stay competitive. He said a lot of landlords in the area were raising rents by even more, so Victor should feel lucky. He also added that nothing was legally binding anyway, just a conversation between 2 guys, and that Victor could always move if he didn't like it. It was like Tom didn't even remember the context of that conversation, or worse, like he didn't care. Victor was stunned. He explained that he'd made major decisions based on that promise. He'd taken a lower paying job. He'd turned down other opportunities. He'd been counting on that agreement. Tom basically said that wasn't his problem, and that business is business. He gave Victor 30 days notice, which was technically more than required, but it didn't feel like a courtesy. It felt like a threat. Suddenly Victor was in an impossible situation. His salary still hadn't increased. He'd already given up his freelance clients, and they'd moved on to other designers. He couldn't just pick up where he left off because his schedule was now locked into a 9-to-5 job. He had about 30 days to find a new apartment, which meant broker fees, deposits, and all the costs that come with moving in a city where rent was already climbing. The $400 increase meant he was going to be spending nearly half his take-home pay on rent instead of the third he'd planned for. Victor spent his lunch breaks apartment hunting. Everything in his price range was either in a neighbourhood he didn't want to live in or had landlords who looked like they'd be even worse than Tom. He found a place about 15 minutes further from work for only $200, more than his new rent would be at Tom's building, but it meant a longer commute and a smaller space. He was angry the entire time he was looking. He kept thinking about how he'd trusted Tom, how he'd literally restructured his entire career around that promise, how he'd felt grateful for something that turned out to be completely meaningless. On his last day at Tom's building, Victor ran into Tom in the hallway. Tom acted like nothing had happened and tried to make small talk. He even seemed a bit surprised when Victor was cold to him. Victor wanted to say something cutting, something that would make Tom understand the impact of what he'd done, but he just grabbed his keys and left. What was the point? Tom was going to rent that apartment to someone else within days, probably for even more than he'd asked Victor to pay. The whole thing taught Victor something deeply cynical about how the world works. A promise that feels binding to you means nothing to someone else if they decide they want something different. It didn't matter that he'd given up opportunities. It didn't matter that he'd trusted Tom's word. It didn't matter that he'd made career decisions based on that conversation. When it came down to it, Tom's business interests won out over Victor's life stability, and there was nothing Victor could do about it except pack up and find somewhere else to live. Man, I hate that for him. Tom literally looked him in the eye, made a deal, and then completely ghosted on it when it became slightly inconvenient. And the worst part is that Victor actually had to restructure his entire career plan because of this. He couldn't go back to freelancing easily. He couldn't negotiate his new salary around that higher rent because the increase was already locked in, and he was basically trapped. Imagine making a major life decision based on someone's promise, and then having that person act like it was never a real thing at all. Speaking of broken promises that mess with your life, let's talk about someone who dealt with betrayal on a completely different level. Alright, so this next one is about a job offer that turned into a complete nightmare, and I'm talking about the kind of thing that makes you question whether you're losing your mind or if people are just genuinely that cruel. Let's jump in. So I got offered a job, or at least I thought I did. I'd been interviewing with this marketing company for about 3 weeks, and it seemed like things were going really well. I'm not exaggerating when I say this place felt perfect. The office was modern, the team seemed genuinely nice during the interviews, and the position was exactly what I'd been working toward for years. Entry-level marketing coordinator, good pay, benefits, room for growth. Everything looked like it was finally clicking into place. The interview process had 3 rounds. First was a phone screen with HR, which went smoothly. They asked the standard questions, I answered everything, and they seemed impressed. Then they invited me in for a second interview with the marketing manager, which was honestly one of the best interviews I've ever had. We talked for like an hour and a half, way longer than scheduled. She kept saying things like, "Oh, I love your creative approach to this problem, and I can already picture you working with our team." At the end, she said, "We're really excited about you. We have one more round, but I think you're a strong candidate." I walked out of there feeling genuinely hopeful. The third interview was with the director and a few team members, more of a group setting to see how I'd mesh with the whole department. Again, it went great. We laughed, they asked thoughtful questions, and I felt like I genuinely connected with these people. When it was wrapping up, the director said, "Okay, we're done here. We're going to talk internally and we'll be in touch really soon." I left thinking I had a good shot, but I wasn't counting on anything. You learn not to get your hopes up too much in job hunting. Then, 3 days later, I got a call from the marketing manager. She sounded genuinely excited on the phone. She said, "Hey, I've got great news. We've made our decision and we'd like to offer you the position." I remember my heart literally jumping. She went through the details of the offer verbally. The salary, the start date, the benefits package. Everything sounded perfect. She said, "So do you accept?" And I said yes. I actually said yes out loud, and she congratulated me and said, "Welcome to the team. We're really excited to have you. You'll receive an official offer letter by email tomorrow, and then we can talk about your start date." Oh, I was on cloud 9. I hung up that phone and I genuinely sat in my apartment for like 10 minutes, just processing what had happened. This was it. This was the job I'd been waiting for. I called my parents and told them. My mum was crying. My dad was saying how proud he was. It felt like everything was finally working out. And then I started thinking about the other opportunities that were still on the table. See, I'd been job hunting for a while, so I had a few things going on simultaneously. There was another interview I had scheduled for the following week with a different company, and I had a phone screening with yet another place. Plus, there were a couple of other companies that had reached out asking if I was still available. The moment I got the offer, I knew what I needed to do. I couldn't ethically keep those other companies waiting or interview elsewhere when I'd already committed to something, so I reached out to all of them. I declined the phone screening. I sent an email to the other company that had an interview scheduled and politely withdrew my application, thanking them for their time and interest. I even reached out to the couple of companies that had just made initial contact and told them I'd accepted a position elsewhere. It all felt very professional and above board. I was doing the right thing, or so I thought. That was on a Thursday that I got the call. Friday came and went with no official offer letter email, but I figured HR was probably backed up. I didn't stress about it too much. I was just excited and planning my first day. But Monday rolled around, and still nothing. I figured I should probably follow up just to confirm everything and figure out when exactly I was supposed to start. So I sent an email to the marketing manager. I kept it casual and friendly. Something like, "Hey, just wanted to follow up on the offer we discussed last week. I'm excited to get started and wanted to confirm my start date and any next steps. Let me know when you get a chance." I didn't hear back that day. I waited another day. Nothing. By Wednesday, I was starting to feel a little anxious. This wasn't normal, right? When someone offers you a job, they follow up with paperwork. They don't just go silent. So I sent another email, this time to HR directly. I just said I was following up on an offer extended on Thursday and wanted to make sure they had all the information they needed from me. Still nothing. By that Friday, it had been a full week of complete silence. No emails, no calls, nothing. And I started to panic because I realised I'd turned down every other opportunity I had. Every single one. I didn't have a backup plan anymore. I'd taken this offer at face value, and I'd burned some bridges in the process, professionally speaking. So I tried calling the marketing manager directly. The call went to voicemail. I left a message saying something like, "Hey, I'm just checking in on the offer we discussed last week. I want to make sure everything's on track. Give me a call back when you get a chance." She never called back. I spent the next 2 weeks absolutely spiraling. I was sending emails every few days to different people at the company. The marketing manager, the director's assistant, the general HR email. I tried to keep them light and not desperate sounding, but internally I was losing it. I kept checking my email obsessively. I'd wake up in the morning and immediately look at my phone hoping something had come through overnight. Nothing ever did. By week 3, I was genuinely confused and starting to get angry underneath the anxiety. This was insane. A company doesn't just offer you a job and then vanish. That's not a thing that happens, except apparently it was happening to me. I looked up the company's number and actually called the main line. I asked for HR. When I got through to someone, I explained the situation as professionally as I could. I said I received a verbal offer on date, and I'm following up because I haven't received the formal offer letter or heard about a start date. The person on the phone put me on hold. They came back like 10 minutes later and said, "I don't see any pending offer for you in our system. Can I have your name again?" I spelled it out. They went through everything again and said, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing here. Are you sure the call came from our company?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just a delay or someone being unprofessional. They had decided to ghost me. Completely and entirely ghost me after a verbal job offer. I had turned down jobs, I had declined opportunities, and I had walked into the next week thinking I had employment, and they had just decided not to do this anymore without bothering to tell me. I never heard from that company again. Not an explanation, not an apology, not even a courtesy rejection email. Just silence. And suddenly I was back to square one. Except now, I didn't have the other opportunities I'd had before because I'd professionally declined them all. It took me another 2 months to find another job, and by then I was so anxious during the entire process that I couldn't even enjoy it. I kept waiting for companies to ghost me. I kept thinking something was going to fall through. That whole experience just broke something in me about the job hunting process. The worst part? I never found out why. I still don't know if it was a budget issue, if the position got cut, if someone else got hired at the last second, or if they just changed their mind. There was never any communication, never any explanation. Just a verbal yes followed by permanent radio silence. Okay, wow, that's absolutely unhinged. Like, who does that? Who calls someone and offers them a job and then just pretends they never did? and the fact that he'd already turned down everything else makes it even worse. This person didn't just waste his time, they actively sabotaged his job search and didn't even have the decency to send a rejection email. That's genuinely one of the most unprofessional things I've heard. Alright, so this next one is about something that hits a little differently. It's that slow burn realization that someone you consider a close friend might not value you the same way. This one comes from someone who finally noticed a pattern that was hard to ignore. Let's dive in. I've been friends with Marcus for like 7 years. We met in college and have always gotten along great. He's the kind of guy who's super social, always has plans, always knows people, and I genuinely liked hanging out with him because he's funny and reliable and just easy to be around. At least I thought he was, but over the past year or so, something started bothering me that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't anything he said directly. It was more like a feeling, like I was being used or something. And I hate even thinking that about my friend, but I couldn't shake it. The first time I really noticed it was about 8 months ago. There was this concert coming to town that I actually really wanted to go to. Marcus mentioned it to me casually one day, and I got excited because I thought we'd go together. But he never actually asked me to go with him. He just talked about how cool it would be. So a week before the show, I texted him and asked if he was going. He said, yeah, he had tickets. I asked if there was still one available, or if we could get another. There was this awkward pause, and then he was like, oh, I'm actually going with some people from work. It might be weird if you came. That hurt a little, but I played it cool and was like, no problem. The night of the concert, I posted on Instagram about something else, and he posted photos from the concert with like 10 people around him. It stung, but I figured maybe it really was a work thing, and he was just being polite. But then it kept happening, over and over. One weekend, he texted me out of nowhere, asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I was actually really happy because we hadn't hung out in like 3 weeks. I said absolutely. We made plans for Saturday at this new sushi place he wanted to try. Saturday comes around, and at like 4 in the afternoon, he texts me saying his other friend just got dumped and needed cheering up. So could we reschedule? I said sure, don't worry about it. No big deal. Except we didn't reschedule for like 2 months. And then one day, I saw him post a story at that exact sushi restaurant with a girl I'd never seen before. I started paying attention after that. Like, really paying attention. And oh my god, once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. Every single time Marcus invited me to do something, there was always a reason. It felt half-hearted, or it would come right after someone else had bailed on him. I'd get a text like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Some people were supposed to come over, but they can't make it. You free? It was like I was the fallback plan, the last resort, the person he'd call when everyone else said no. I remember one specific time that really drove it home. There was a New Year's Eve party. I didn't have any solid plans, so I was hoping we'd do something together, since we always had before. I didn't ask him about it though. I was waiting to see if he'd invite me. A few days before New Year's, he finally texted me. Hey, I'm throwing a thing on the 31st. Some people are still deciding if they can come. You want to be there? I should have said something right then, but I didn't. I just said, yeah, sounds good. The night of, I got there, and there were maybe 5 other people there. He spent the whole night on his phone texting people and getting more and more disappointed as they said they couldn't make it. And I was there watching my friend basically wish he had other people around instead of me. I wasn't the first choice for anything. I was just filler. I sat with that feeling for a while. I didn't want to be that guy who ruins a friendship over nothing, you know? But it also didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a fundamental shift in how I understood our relationship. So I decided to test it. I know that sounds weird, but I needed to know if this was all in my head or if it was real. I stopped initiating plans. I didn't text him first. I didn't ask to hang out. I just waited, and Marcus barely reached out. Over the course of 6 weeks, he texted me maybe twice, and both times it was to ask if I wanted to come over because his original group chat plans fell through. No other contact. No, hey, how are you doing? No, let's catch up soon. Just nothing unless there was a backup slot to fill. So I finally called him on it. We were at his place one night. I'd come over because he'd asked, naturally, and I just brought it up. I was trying not to be accusatory, but I basically told him that I'd noticed he only ever invited me when other plans fell through, that I felt like a placeholder, that it hurt because I considered him a real friend, but he seemed to see me as a backup option. He got defensive right away. He said I was being crazy and paranoid, that he valued me as a friend, that I was reading too much into it. But then he admitted that, yeah, I guess he mostly hung out with me when his other friends were busy. He tried to frame it like that wasn't a big deal, like, I reach out to you, that's what matters, right? But that's not what matters. What matters is whether someone actually wants you there or is just using you to fill a void. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. Not the friendship necessarily, but not pretending that this dynamic was okay. I said if he wanted to hang out with me, it had to be because he actually wanted to see me, not because everyone else said no. And if that wasn't something he could do, then we probably shouldn't be hanging out at all. He apologised, but it felt empty. And honestly, we haven't really hung out since then. I think the friendship is just kind of done now. But I don't regret saying something. I'd rather know where I stand than spend years being someone's backup plan. Man, that one stings, because you can see exactly where Blake realised he wasn't valued the way he thought he was. Like, 7 years of friendship, and the guy couldn't even put him first once. The worst part is, Blake actually had to spell it out, and Marcus still tried to justify it. That's rough. When someone makes you feel like you're only worth something when nobody better is available, that's not friendship. That's just convenient. Alright, so this next one is about something that hits different when it happens at work. You know that feeling when you realise you're on the outside of something? Yeah, it gets worse when you work with these people every single day. Let's get into it. So I've been working at this marketing agency for about 3 years now. It's a decent job, decent team, or at least I thought it was. There are about 8 people in my department, and we all sit pretty close to each other in an open office layout. Not ideal for privacy, but you make it work. We get along fine, grab lunch together sometimes, chat about weekends, all that normal co-worker stuff. Nothing super close, but nothing weird either. Just a solid professional environment where everyone's respectful and does their job. Last Thursday, I was sitting at my desk around 4 p.m, wrapping up some emails before heading out. The office was pretty quiet because most people were in meetings or focused on their work. I noticed a few of my co-workers huddled around one of the desks in the corner, talking quietly. At first I didn't pay attention. People cluster like that all the time. But then I heard the word weekend and someone laughing about something being exclusive. I didn't think much of it at that moment, but something in my brain registered it. You know that instinct you get when you feel left out of something? That subtle gut punch? I was packing up my stuff to leave when I decided to swing by the printer near where they were talking. Completely innocent reason. My hand to God, I just needed to print something. But as I got closer, I caught fragments of the conversation. Someone was saying something about a cabin rental, about coordinating everyone's schedules, and then I heard it, clear as day. Don't mention it to anyone else yet. We want to keep it to just us. My stomach went tight. I printed my document without looking at them, but my mind was spinning. Keep it to just us. Who was us? I went back to my desk and sat there for a few minutes, trying not to spiral, but the paranoia was already creeping in. I kept replaying the snippets I'd heard. Cabin, exclusive. The way they were huddled together like they were sharing a secret. The next day, I tried not to think about it. Tried to be normal, but I was hyper aware of every conversation happening around me. And then, around mid-morning, I heard it again. This time from a different corner of the office. 2 of my co-workers were comparing notes about what to pack, and one of them said, "I can't believe everyone from the department is coming. This is going to be amazing." Everyone. Everyone from the department. That phrase looped in my head all day. By Friday, I knew something was definitely happening. I'd caught little pieces throughout the week. A group text notification sound from someone's phone. Someone asking another person about their dietary restrictions for the weekend. a Venmo notification that said something like, "Cabin deposit paid." The pieces were all there, and I was putting them together like I was solving some horrifying puzzle. I realised I didn't know anything officially. Nobody had told me directly, but it was clear something was being planned, and I wasn't part of it. The question that wouldn't leave my head was, why? What had I done? Was I the problem? Had I offended someone? Did I say something inappropriate that I'd forgotten about? My brain was doing laps, trying to figure out what I'd done to deserve being excluded. The worst part was the not knowing. If someone had just told me, "Hey, we're planning something and you're not invited," at least I'd have an explanation. At least I could process it. But this slow realization through overheard conversations and fragmented information, it was brutal. It made me feel like I was on the outside looking in, watching everyone else be friends while I was just there. The following Monday, I decided I had to say something. I couldn't keep living in this weird, paranoid state, and it was eating at me all weekend. I caught one of the people I'm closest to in the office, someone I actually considered a work friend. I pulled them aside and just asked, as casually as I could manage, "Hey, I feel like something's going on. There's like a group trip or something happening this weekend." I tried to play it off like I wasn't sure, like I wasn't dying to know. The look that crossed their face. I'll never forget it. Guilty, embarrassed. They immediately looked uncomfortable, and that's when I knew my suspicions were absolutely correct. They exchanged a look with someone across the room, and then they said, "Oh yeah, we were planning to tell you. It's kind of a last-minute thing, and we already have the numbers locked in at the cabin." Ira, numbers locked in. So I wasn't even a possibility. I was already excluded from the count. I asked them straight up, "Why wasn't I invited?" And they fumbled through an explanation that made no sense. Something about the group already being set and not wanting to throw off the dynamic. About how it was originally supposed to be smaller, and by the time it grew, it felt weird to add me. They kept apologising, kept saying they felt bad about it, but none of it answered the actual question of what I had done to deserve this. I tried to keep my composure, but I could feel my chest getting tight. I was standing there, in the middle of the office, feeling smaller than I ever had. The person I was talking to could tell I was hurt, and they kept digging themselves deeper with worse and worse explanations. "It's not personal," they kept saying. But what else could it be? We worked together every day. We had no conflict. There was no reason to exclude me except that they didn't want me there. I nodded, excused myself, and went back to my desk. For the rest of the day, I felt like everyone was watching me. I felt paranoid and angry and hurt all at the same time. The weird thing was, after it came out, nobody really acknowledged it. They'd go back to their normal conversations around me, and I'd just sit there wondering if they felt awkward or if they didn't care at all. That cabin trip happened. They all went and came back Monday, talking about how amazing it was. And I had to sit there and listen to it. Had to hear about inside jokes I wasn't part of, stories I didn't witness, memories I couldn't share. It created this weird rift. I'm still here, I still do my job, but something shifted. I started questioning every interaction, wondering if people actually liked me or if I was just tolerated, and I still don't know why I was excluded. Nobody ever gave me a real answer. That kind of thing messes with your head. It's not like an argument where you can resolve it. It's this lingering uncertainty that just sits with you every single day at work. Man, that's the kind of thing that makes you paranoid forever. Like, even if they plan another trip and invite you, you're always going to wonder if it's just because they felt guilty. The fact that nobody could give a real reason is somehow worse than if they just said what they actually thought. Speaking of situations where people can't just be straight with you, let's talk about someone dealing with a completely different kind of exclusion in their personal life. Alright, so this next one is about a situation that's guaranteed to get under your skin. You know that feeling when you do something nice for a group of people and it completely blows up in your face? Yeah, that's what we've got here. So I was really excited about this concert coming up. It was this band I'd been following for years, and they finally announced a tour date in my city. I'm talking about one of those shows where you've been waiting for it to actually happen, and when it does, you just know you have to go. It's not often that bands like this come through, and I didn't want to miss it. I mentioned it to my friend group pretty casually at first, just like, hey, this band's coming to town in a few months. Anyone interested? And honestly, I wasn't even expecting a ton of people to want to go, but the response was actually really positive. There were like 6 of us interested, which was awesome because the more people you have, the better the experience usually is, right? We could make a whole thing out of it. Pre-show dinner, drinks after, the whole experience. So we started talking about tickets and figuring out logistics. The show was about 4 months away, so there was plenty of time. But I was the one who kept the conversation going, kept reminding people about when tickets went on sale, what the prices were looking like, all that stuff. I was genuinely invested in making sure this happened. Most of my friends weren't really doing their part to stay on top of it, but I figured I'd just be the one to take charge and handle it. That seemed fine to me. When ticket sales opened up, the prices were actually reasonable for a band that big. Not cheap, but not outrageous either. I think they were around $90 each. So when the day came to actually buy them, I decided to just go ahead and purchase them for everyone. I know, that sounds like maybe not the best idea in hindsight, but at the time it made sense to me. We all wanted to go, everyone had seemed excited, and I didn't want tickets to sell out while people were sitting around trying to figure out who was going to buy them first. I figured I'd buy them, send everyone the total with their seat assignments, and they'd just Venmo me their portion. Super straightforward. I spent probably $360 that day, 6 tickets at $90 each. That was a significant amount of money for me at that point in my life. I wasn't rich or anything, but I had saved up a bit and I could absorb the cost temporarily, knowing people would pay me back. I texted the group chat with a screenshot of the confirmation and broke down what each person owed. I was really upbeat about it too, like, got us all set, here are your seats, let me know when you can Venmo me. I sent that message on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, one person had already paid me back. Cool, that was fast. But then, over the next week, the responses started getting weird. One person said they'd pay me back soon. Another person said they'd cover it once they got paid on Friday. Fine, whatever. I wasn't in a rush. But then things got quieter and quieter, and the concert was still months away, so I wasn't too stressed yet. But I also started noticing the conversation about the concert kind of fading from the group chat. It stopped being this exciting thing everyone was talking about. Then, about 6 weeks before the show, someone in the group texted me privately. They said they weren't going to be able to make it. They had some family stuff come up, and they'd have to cancel. I was disappointed, but I understand life happens. I told them no problem, and we could figure out what to do about their ticket. I assumed they'd at least want to pay me back for it, you know? But they kind of just didn't bring it up again. Then another person dropped out, then another. I'm sitting here watching my group chat about the concert basically dissolve, and no one is addressing the ticket situation at all. By the time we got 2 weeks out from the show, only 2 of us were still planning to go. 2 out of 6. And the 4 people who had bailed, none of them had paid me back. None of them had even really acknowledged that they owed me money. When I brought it up to one of them, they were like, "Oh yeah, about that. Can we talk about it after?" After what? After the show that you're not going to? I didn't understand the logic. The worst part wasn't even the money at that point. Though obviously that sucked. It was the dismissiveness. It was like they'd completely forgotten that they'd asked me to buy them tickets and that they had a financial obligation to me. When I tried to be direct about it, asking when they could pay me back, the responses were vague. Soon. This month, probably. I'm a little tight right now. Nobody actually committed to anything. And meanwhile, I'm sitting on 4 tickets that are completely useless to me, and the concert is coming up in days. I ended up eating the cost for 3 of those tickets. The 4th person eventually sent me half of what they owed, like 3 weeks after the concert happened, with this message like they were doing me some huge favour. The other 3 people never paid me back at all. I didn't push it too hard because I didn't want to become the person they avoided. And honestly, the resentment was already building. I didn't want to lose friends over it, even though I felt completely used. What really got me was that nobody acknowledged how thoughtless it all was. Nobody said, "Hey, I'm sorry we bailed and you lost money." It was just treated like a thing that happened, and then we all just moved on. But I didn't move on that easily. I'm way more hesitant now to do stuff like that for people. I pay for my own tickets, I buy my own stuff, and if someone wants to go somewhere, I tell them to buy their own tickets and meet me there. It's not the way I want to operate with friends, but it's what I've learned works. That's rough, man. You literally subsidised 3 tickets for people who couldn't be bothered to acknowledge they owed you anything. The fact that nobody even apologised or tried to make it right is probably the most annoying part. You learned an expensive lesson about doing financial favours for groups who don't have their act together. This next one's about financial trust, completely shattered. And honestly, it's one of those situations where I genuinely can't believe the level of dishonesty happening here. Let's jump in. 2 years ago, my sister came to me in a rough spot. She was between jobs, had just gotten out of a bad relationship, and needed help covering rent for a couple months while she got back on her feet. We'd always been close growing up, and I wanted to be there for her. I wasn't in the best financial position myself. I was saving for a house down payment and had been pretty careful with my money. But I thought, this is my sister. This is temporary. I can do this. We sat down at my kitchen table and had a very specific conversation about it. I told her I could lend her $5,000 and she needed to pay me back $500 a month, starting 3 months out, once she had a steady job again. She was grateful, kept saying how much this meant to her and how she'd get back on her feet quickly. I even wrote it down on a piece of paper, nothing formal, no contract, but just written out with the amount, the monthly payment plan, and both our signatures. We were both adults. I trusted my sister. Those first 3 months, she was doing okay. She got a job at a retail store, seemed to be stabilising. I didn't ask her about the money yet, since we'd agreed the repayment would start after that period. But then month 4 came around, and I brought it up casually. I texted her, "Hey, so the loan repayment kicks in this month, right? Let's figure out what works for your schedule. I'm flexible on the timing. I just need to start seeing some payments." She didn't respond for 2 days. When she did, she just said, "Yeah, let's talk soon." But weeks kept passing and I had to keep pushing. Finally, I called her and asked directly. She was vague. She said work had been slower than expected and money was tight. I reminded her that this was the plan we'd agreed on, and I was actually counting on getting this money back. I needed it for my house fund. She said she understood, but asked if she could start in a few more months. I was frustrated but not angry yet. Life happens, I figured. But months turned into over a year. I'd bring it up maybe once every few months because it felt awkward to keep harping on it. But she'd always have an excuse. Moving expenses, medical bills. Her car broke down. Fair things, sure, but we'd had an agreement. I never pressured her hard though, because I didn't want family drama. I kept telling myself she'd eventually come through. Then about 6 months ago, I was at my parents' house for dinner with my whole family there. My other sister, my brother, my parents, everyone gathered around. We were all sitting around talking about a big family trip coming up, and my sister mentioned casually that she'd just booked a vacation to Mexico with her friends. 2 weeks, all-inclusive resort. She was excited about it, showing pictures on her phone, talking about how much she needed the break. I literally felt something inside me snap. Here she was, taking a 2-week vacation to a luxury resort, and she hadn't paid back a single dollar to me. Not one, not even a partial payment. I tried to stay calm at dinner, but I couldn't. After we ate, I pulled her aside and asked to talk privately. I was trying not to be angry, but I was angry. I said, "You're taking a 2-week trip, and you haven't paid me back anything from the $5,000 I lent you. How is that fair?" And that's when it happened. She looked at me genuinely confused and said, "Lent me? Nathan, that was a gift. You gave me that money as a gift." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "No, absolutely not. We sat down, we talked about it, we wrote it down. Monthly payments starting after 3 months. You signed that paper. That was the agreement." She denied it. She said she never remembered it that way, that she thought I was helping her out because family helps family, and there was never supposed to be repayment. She actually tried to make me feel guilty, like I was being stingy by expecting her to pay back money I'd lent her. She said, "I can't believe you're bringing this up now and trying to make me feel bad about accepting help from my own brother." I stood there stunned. Not only was she refusing to acknowledge our agreement, but she was twisting it to make herself the victim. She literally rewrote history right in front of me. I told her I had the piece of paper we both signed, and she just shrugged and said, "Well, I don't remember signing anything." When I went back into the living room, my mum must have noticed something was wrong because she asked what happened. Before I could explain properly, my sister came out and told everyone that I was upset with her for not paying back money that I'd given her as a gift, and now I was trying to get reimbursed. She made it sound like I was a heartless person trying to get money back that I'd already given to her when she was struggling. My brother actually sided with her. He said, "Man, that's not cool. She was going through a rough time, and you're going to hold that over her head." Or my parents looked uncomfortable and didn't really say much, but I could tell they thought I was in the wrong. Nobody even asked to see the paper. Nobody asked for my side of the story. They just took what she said at face value and decided I was the villain. That vacation happened 2 weeks later. She went to Mexico and posted pictures the whole time, looking happy and relaxed, drinking at beach bars, parasailing, the whole thing. Meanwhile, I was furious and heartbroken. My own sister had literally gaslit me about an agreement we made, taken a luxury vacation with money I lent her, and somehow gotten my family to believe I was the bad guy for expecting her to honour our agreement. I haven't brought it up since then because every time I do, it turns into this thing where I'm cast as the villain, and I've basically written off that $5,000 at this point. But what hurts more than the money is that my sister lied about what happened and convinced my family that I was wrong for expecting her to repay a loan. It's made me question whether I can trust her at all, and honestly, I don't know how to move forward with that relationship. I feel betrayed not just by her, but by my whole family for believing her without asking questions. Wow, so she didn't just refuse to pay you back, she literally rewrote the entire agreement in front of your face and got your family to take her side. The gaslighting is unreal, and the worst part is you have proof and people still chose to believe her version. That's not just betrayal from your sister, that's betrayal from your whole family right there. Alright, so this one's going to probably piss you off a bit, because honestly, it still pisses me off. So I've been at my company for about 5 years now. Started as an entry-level coordinator, worked my way up to senior coordinator, and I manage a decent-sized team. The pay isn't amazing, but it's stable, and I've got decent benefits. The job's boring sometimes, but I do the work, show up, and generally keep things running smoothly. Nothing glamorous, but I've built something there. About 8 months ago, my manager calls me into her office and tells me we're hiring someone new. She asks if I'd be willing to train them. I'm a little hesitant because I'm already stretched thin with my actual work, but I say yes anyway. I want to be a team player, right? Plus, I think it'll look good for any future promotions. I've got more experience than almost anyone else on our team, so naturally, I figured I'd be the best person to do it. The new hire comes in, and he seems fine. Nice guy, asks good questions, seems eager to learn. I spend weeks showing him the ropes. I'm talking about everything. The systems we use, how to manage projects, client relations, the whole thing. I'm patient. I explain things clearly. I even stay late a few times to help him catch up on things he missed. I'm really giving this my all because I remember how overwhelming the first few months were for me when I started. He seems to catch on pretty fast, which is great. I'm actually kind of proud of how quickly he's learning. I'm thinking, okay, this is good. I trained someone who's going to contribute to the team, and that reflects well on me. Maybe this gets me noticed. Maybe this is the thing that finally gets me considered for a real promotion. Fast forward a couple of months, and he's up to speed. He's doing his job, producing decent work, fitting in with the team. Everything seems good. Then, completely randomly, I'm in the break room with a coworker, and they mention something about the new guy's salary. I don't remember exactly how it came up, but they said something like, "Yeah, they really came in hot with the budget for him." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they kind of hesitated and said, "I probably shouldn't say anything, but he's making more than you are." I literally felt my stomach drop. I asked them what they meant, and they told me what they'd overheard during a conversation between two managers. The new guy, who I trained, who had zero experience in this position when he started, who had to be taught everything from the ground up. He was hired at a salary higher than mine. A salary I'd built up to over 5 years through promotions and raises that amounted to maybe 2% a year if I was lucky. I was shocked. Like, genuinely shocked. I tried to play it cool, but I was fuming inside. I thanked them for telling me and tried to move on with my day. But that information just sat with me like a weight. I couldn't focus on work. I kept doing the math in my head. How much more? How much had I left on the table by being patient and loyal? That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have, but I did it anyway. I looked up what he was hired at using the job posting that was still up on our website. Based on what I found, he was making at least $8,000 more a year than me. Possibly more. And I trained him. I brought him up to speed. I invested my time and energy into someone who was being paid more than I was while I was doing it. I decided I had to say something. I scheduled a meeting with my manager, Rachel. I came in with my facts straight. I told her I'd learned about the salary discrepancy and that I was concerned about it. I didn't come in angry. I tried to be professional and measured. I explained that I had significantly more experience. I was responsible for managing other team members, and I'd spent weeks training this guy without any additional compensation or recognition. I asked how that decision was made and whether we could talk about adjusting my salary to reflect my actual value. Rachel looked uncomfortable. She told me that he had negotiated hard during the hiring process, and they'd made him an offer they thought was competitive for the market rate. I said, "But I'm already here doing a senior level job, and I'm making less than someone I trained who's doing a junior level position. What's the logic there?" She said something vague about how salary discussions were confidential and that I shouldn't be comparing my compensation with other employees. I pointed out that I wasn't the one who found out by snooping around. I overheard a conversation. I told her that what mattered to me wasn't so much what he was making, but that I felt undervalued. I've been loyal, I've taken on extra responsibilities, and I was apparently passed over for competitive compensation while they brought in someone new at a higher rate. She said they'd look into it, but basically the conversation ended there. She didn't commit to anything, didn't apologise for the disparity or explain the logic behind it. Just a vague, "We'll see what we can do." Spoiler alert, nothing happened. I had the same conversation again 2 months later and got the same non-answer. Meanwhile, he's just doing his job, unaware that I'm slowly dying inside every time I see him. I don't blame him. He negotiated well, good for him. But my manager and the company, they dropped the ball. Now every time I'm training someone new or helping him with something, there's this underlying resentment. I'm still professional. I still do my job, but the motivation isn't there anymore. I feel like an idiot for being the team player, for being willing to help, for thinking that loyalty and hard work would be rewarded. Instead, I got played. My company essentially said, "We value you enough to give you more work and responsibility, but not enough to pay you competitively." I'm job hunting now. I've had 3 interviews in the last month with other companies, and honestly, the idea of leaving doesn't even stress me out anymore. It just feels inevitable. Why would I stay somewhere that clearly doesn't value my contributions? Man, that's one of those situations where you're almost mad at yourself for being cooperative. Like, you train the guy, and they reward you by underpaying you while overpaying him from day one. The fact that she couldn't even explain the logic or commit to fixing it is somehow worse than if she'd just said no up front. That's the kind of thing that makes you realise your loyalty isn't worth anything to them. Alright, so this next one is about someone who thought their relationship was just going through a rough patch, but it turns out their partner had a very different definition of what needing space actually meant. I've been with my partner for 4 years. 4 years of building a life together, making plans, talking about the future. We weren't perfect, but I genuinely believed we were solid. We lived together for the last 2 years in a small apartment that we decorated together, adopted a dog, had our routines. Life felt stable. Life felt like it was going somewhere. Around 6 months ago, things started feeling off. Nothing dramatic, but I noticed we weren't laughing as much. We'd fall asleep watching TV instead of actually talking. When we did talk, it felt surface level. Work stress, bills, the dog needing a vet appointment. Nothing about us. Nothing about how we were actually doing. I brought it up a few times, saying I felt like we were drifting, but my partner would always say everything was fine. Just busy, just tired. I figured it was a phase. Every long-term relationship has them, right? Then about 3 months ago, my partner started mentioning that they felt overwhelmed. They said they needed to focus on themselves for a bit, that they were feeling lost and weren't sure what they wanted anymore. I asked what that meant for us, and they said, I don't know. I just need some space to figure things out. It's not about you. I just need to clear my head. I remember feeling terrified when they said that, but I also tried to be understanding. I didn't want to be the clingy, needy boyfriend who couldn't let their partner breathe, so I gave them space. I really did. I stopped asking when we'd hang out. I didn't initiate conversations about feelings or the future. I let them have their room on some nights when they said they wanted to be alone. I told myself this was healthy, that this was what mature relationships did. I was giving them the freedom to figure out what they needed. I was being the supportive partner. What I didn't know was that while I was at home, respecting their need for space, they were out building a new relationship with someone else. I found out completely by accident. One of my friends texted me, asking if I was okay with my partner dating someone new. I thought it was a joke. I actually laughed when I read it. But then my friend sent me a screenshot from Instagram, a public post from my partner with someone I'd never seen before. The caption said something like, "Finally found someone who gets me." And there were multiple photos. Them smiling at a restaurant, them at a concert, them holding hands. The post had been up for over a week. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I checked my phone for any messages from my partner telling me this was happening, explaining things, saying anything. Nothing. Radio silence. Meanwhile, they were making it official on social media for everyone to see. I called them immediately. They didn't answer. I texted. They took hours to respond. And when they did, it was just, "We should talk when you get home." When I got home, my partner was sitting on the couch with this closed-off expression I'd never seen before. I asked straight up what was going on. They said, "I know you probably already know. It happened while we were on a break." A break. They called 3 months of needing space a break. I asked them when this started, and that's when the timeline made me feel absolutely sick. It started 2 weeks into the space. 2 weeks. I had been giving them the benefit of the doubt, thinking they were meditating or journaling or doing whatever they needed to do to find themselves. Instead, they were meeting someone at a coffee shop and immediately starting to date them. They said they didn't plan for it to happen, that they met this person and just felt a connection. They said when they were with this new person, they felt like themselves again. I asked how long they'd known this wasn't about us needing to fix things. They said they knew pretty early on, maybe after the 2nd or 3rd week. So for another month and a half, while I was at home giving them space, thinking they were trying to work through their feelings, they were already committed to someone else and hadn't even had the decency to break up with me. The most infuriating part was their explanation. They said they didn't know how to tell me. They said they thought maybe they'd figure out what they wanted and come back to me. They said the new relationship just moved really fast and suddenly it was serious and they didn't know how to undo it. They were sorry, they said. They never meant to hurt me. They just needed to figure things out. And apparently, figuring things out meant dating someone else while I waited around like an idiot. I asked why they made it public on Instagram. They said they didn't think I'd see it, which felt like the most insulting thing they could have said. Like I wouldn't eventually find out. Like the mutual friends wouldn't tell me. like I wasn't going to notice their entire relationship status changing. I moved out a week later. My parents let me stay with them while I got my head on straight. The dog situation was complicated, but we agreed I'd take him since I was the one who'd bonded with him more. My partner didn't fight me on it. What really got to me, though, was replaying those 3 months in my head. Every time they said they needed space, they were probably texting this other person. Every time I stepped back and tried to be understanding, they were getting closer to someone else. Every time I asked if we were okay and they said they didn't know, they probably already knew they wanted to be with someone else. It wasn't a lie of commission, it was a lie of omission, which somehow feels worse because it was so deliberate. The worst part is that I can't even be angry in a clean way. If they'd just broken up with me, sure, I'd be hurt, but I could move on. This feels like I was strung along, kept on hold while they test drove something new. I was the safe option. They didn't have to officially leave until they were sure about the upgrade. It's been 2 months now. They've been very publicly happy with this new person, posting about them constantly, taking them to places we used to go. My friends are supportive, but I can tell they think I should be over it by now. But there's something about the specific betrayal of this that's hard to shake. The space lie, the pretending they didn't know, the public announcement that said absolutely nothing about the actual situation. I'm doing better. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm starting to understand that someone who could do that probably wasn't capable of the relationship I thought we had anyway. But I still get angry when I think about how long I sat there, respecting their request, being the bigger person, only to find out they were building something else. That's the thing about space, I guess. Sometimes people say they need it to find themselves. Sometimes they actually need it to escape you. Wow, so needing space was code for I'm already dating someone else, and I'm hoping you won't notice. The fact that they made it public on Instagram before even breaking up is actually unhinged. Like, they didn't want to break up, they didn't want to have that conversation, they just wanted to get caught and force the issue. That's cowardly. The worst part is the timeline revelation where they knew way earlier than they admitted. That's not a mistake, that's a calculated lie. Our next story takes us to the workplace, where one co-worker decided to completely throw another under the bus to save their own skin during a meeting. Alright, so this next one is absolutely messed up. We're talking a serious violation of privacy at work, the kind of thing that makes you realise just how paranoid you need to be at your job. This comes from someone who discovered their boss was literally spying on their employees in the most invasive way possible. I work at a marketing firm downtown, and I've been there for about 3 years. My boss, Martin, seemed pretty cool when I started. Not the friendliest guy, but he kept to himself and let us do our work. Or at least that's what I thought. Everything changed when I noticed something weird happening in our Slack messages. I was messaging my co-worker, Paul, about a frustrating client meeting we just had. Nothing crazy, just venting about how the client kept changing the scope of work and blaming us for delays that were totally out of our control. I was being honest but professional. Just typical work frustration, you know. Hey. An hour after I sent that message to Paul, Martin called me into his office. He sat me down and said, "I heard the client meeting didn't go well. Next time, maybe don't be so defensive about timelines." I was confused. How did he know what I said in a private Slack message to Paul? He wasn't in that conversation. I asked him directly. "How do you know what I told Paul?" His face got weird for a second, like he got caught, and then he just said something vague about Paul mentioning it. But Paul wouldn't have brought that up to Martin. It didn't make sense. That's when things started clicking into place. I'd been noticing little things for a while, moments where Martin seemed to know details about conversations that didn't involve him, like when he commented on how I was concerned about a project deadline according to one of my messages to another co-worker, Jennifer. Or when he made a weird joke about something I'd been discussing privately with another guy about whether we should ask for a raise. He acted like he was just making an observation, but the timing was too specific, too perfect. I started paying attention. I'd messaged someone, and within the same day, Martin would bring up something I'd said in that message. It happened too many times to be a coincidence, so I did something stupid. I sent Paul a test message. I told him I'd seen a job posting that I was thinking about applying to, and that I was getting pretty bored at our current company. Nothing crazy, just casual venting. The next morning, Martin called me in again. He said, "I hope you're not thinking about leaving us. We'd hate to lose you." No one else knew about that message. Paul would have said something to me directly before going to Martin. He's not that kind of guy, but somehow Martin knew. He knew exactly what I'd written. I went home that night and I felt sick. I realised my boss was reading our private messages, not just skimming them. He was actively monitoring what we were saying to each other. I didn't know how he was doing it, whether he had some admin access to Slack or if there was some other technical thing going on, but it was definitely happening. I asked our IT guy casually about it, and he got super uncomfortable. He said there's an admin dashboard that lets management view certain channels, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer about whether Martin was using it. He basically confirmed it without confirming it, if that makes sense. But honestly, the how doesn't even matter at this point. What matters is that it's happening. My boss is reading conversations I'm having with my co-workers that are supposed to be private. Things shifted after I figured this out. Suddenly I became hyper-aware of what I was writing. Paul and I stopped venting about work stuff in Slack entirely. We started calling each other to talk about anything remotely sensitive. Our other co-worker basically stopped messaging altogether and started scheduling in-person meetings for anything she wanted to discuss. The whole office atmosphere changed. Everyone became robotic. Messages became formal and cold. Nobody said anything to Martin or brought it up officially because we were all terrified of what would happen if he knew we knew. I watched people's personalities completely flatten over the next few weeks. You could actually see it happen. The casual conversations just stopped. People who used to have friendly banter in Slack went silent or kept things extremely surface level. It's like we were all walking around on eggshells, wondering if Martin was watching, which he obviously was. The worst part is that nobody confronted him about it. Not officially anyway. Some of us talked in person about how violated we felt, but there was this underlying fear. What if confronting him made things worse? What if he retaliated? He's our boss. He controls our schedules, our raises, our performance reviews. So we all just lived with it. We all just accepted that our private communications weren't actually private. I'm still working there. I don't know if that makes me a coward or just realistic about my job situation. I can't afford to just leave right now, but every message I write in Slack, I think about Martin reading it, and it's exhausting. It's paranoid and toxic, but that's the environment he created. I have to assume that anything I write could be used against me somehow. That's not a workplace. That's a surveillance state. The thing that really gets me is that he never even had the decency to be transparent about it. If he'd sent out a memo saying, "Hey, management reviews Slack conversations," at least you'd be prepared for it. You'd know. But sneaking around, using it as leverage to call people out for things they said privately, monitoring who's looking for other jobs, that's dystopian. That's a violation of every reasonable expectation of privacy you're supposed to have. I catch myself sometimes in conversations with people at work, and I still have to stop myself from saying anything real. It's been months and the paranoia hasn't gone away. Every time Martin makes a casual comment, I wonder if he's read another message. I wonder if he's building a case against someone. I wonder if my casual frustrations are going to come back to haunt me in some way. Most of my co-workers are looking for new jobs now. Half of them have already put out feelers. Nobody wants to stay in an environment where they can't trust that their manager respects basic boundaries. But we're all stuck here for now, being careful with every single word. All because our boss decided our private communications were his to monitor and use whenever he wanted. Okay, that is absolutely horrifying. So this boss is literally monitoring private conversations and using them as leverage, and nobody's doing anything about it because they're terrified. The paranoia that creates is insane. You literally cannot feel safe communicating at work anymore. That's not management. That's just creepy surveillance with a power imbalance baked in. Alright, so this next one is about trust, or really, the complete lack of it. This is a story about someone who had their back completely against the wall at work, and they reached out to their friend, thinking that's what friends do for each other. But what happened after is the kind of betrayal that makes you question everything. Here we go. I covered for a friend at work, and they denied it later when it would have made me look good. I work in project management for a mid-sized consulting firm, and I've been there for about 3 years. My friend Tyler and I met during onboarding and became pretty close, pretty quickly. We'd grab lunch together, complain about deadlines, the usual work friendship stuff. About 6 months ago, Tyler's life started falling apart. His relationship ended badly, he was dealing with some serious family stuff, and honestly, he was just not in a good place mentally. I could see it at work. He was distracted, missing deadlines, showing up late. Our boss, Victoria, had started to notice too, and there were some tense conversations happening. One day, Tyler pulled me aside and told me he was really struggling. He had a massive client presentation scheduled for the next day, and he just didn't have it in him to prepare. He asked if there was any way I could help him work on the pitch deck that night. I said, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what you do for people you care about, right? But here's the thing, I had my own deadline the same day. I had to deliver a report for another client, and it was actually due that morning before the presentation even happened. So I stayed up basically all night. I finished my own report, sent it in by the deadline, and then spent the rest of the night helping Tyler put together this presentation. We ordered food, went through the deck like 5 times, practiced his talking points. By the time I left his place, it was 5 in the morning, and I'd had maybe 45 minutes of sleep. I went straight to work from there. Tyler looked relatively human at least. Presentable. Ready. The presentation went great. The client loved it. Victoria was impressed with how polished everything was, and Tyler looked like he'd actually gotten his head on straight, which, I mean, he had, because we'd fixed it together. But he didn't mention me. Not to Victoria, not to anyone. I didn't expect him to throw me a parade or anything, but I also wasn't expecting complete silence. A few days later, Victoria called me into her office. She wanted to talk about my performance. She said she'd noticed I seemed tired lately, that my focus wasn't where it usually was. She was giving me the "we're concerned about you" talk, and I realised in that moment that Tyler hadn't told her anything. She didn't know why I looked like a zombie. She didn't know I'd sacrificed an entire night of sleep to help him save his presentation. As far as she knew, I'd just come to work completely unprepared and exhausted for no reason. I could have said something right then. I could have explained the whole situation, but I didn't want to throw Tyler under the bus, even though that's what this whole situation was starting to feel like. So I just said I'd been dealing with some personal stuff and that I was handling it. She said she understood, and if I needed to take some time, just let her know. But the damage was kind of done, you know. She thought I wasn't performing at my best, and she didn't have the context that I'd actually gone above and beyond. What really got me, though, was when I talked to Tyler about it later. I wasn't even angry at that point. I was just confused. I asked him why he didn't mention to Victoria that I'd helped him, and he got defensive. He said that if he told her about it, it would look like he couldn't handle his own work. He said he needed Victoria to think he was capable of handling things on his own. And I just stared at him because, okay, I get it, but at what cost? He was so worried about looking weak that he let me look incompetent instead. I told him, he threw me under the bus, and he denied it. He said he wasn't throwing me under the bus, he was just protecting his own career. He said I was being selfish for expecting him to advertise that I'd helped him. That if the roles were reversed, he'd do the same thing. And maybe that's true. Maybe I don't know what I would have done in his position, but it didn't make it hurt less. The friendship pretty much died after that. We still see each other at work, but it's different now. It's cordial and distant. I don't trust him anymore, and he seems to sense that. What really gets me is that he was right. People are probably more concerned about protecting their own image than they are about loyalty. That's a depressing realization to have about someone you called your friend. The worst part is knowing that I'd do it again. If Tyler came to me tomorrow with the same situation, I'd probably help him. And that makes me feel like an idiot, because he's already proven he wouldn't do the same for me. I guess that's the real betrayal. Not that he didn't acknowledge my help, but that I'm apparently wired in a way where I put other people first, and they're wired in a way where they put themselves first. And those two things don't mix well. Man, that's rough. So Tyler got to look capable and competent because of Cole's sacrifice, and then turned around and let him take the hit for being exhausted. The audacity to get mad when called out on it too, like Cole was somehow selfish for expecting basic acknowledgement. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you, especially when you realise you'd probably still help him if he asked. It's like your own kindness becomes your weakness with people like that. Alright, so this next story is about one of those situations where someone completely disrespects your space and your agreements, and then acts like you're the unreasonable one for being upset about it. Let's get into this. So I signed a lease with my roommate, Chris, about 2 years ago. We'd been friends since college, got along pretty well, and decided to split a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. The lease was clear. 2 people, 2 names on the document, 2 of us paying rent. That was the agreement we both made with the landlord and with each other. Chris had been seeing someone for about a year, and they seemed fine. Nice enough person. I'd met them a handful of times at apartment gatherings, or when they'd stay over occasionally. Nothing weird about it, but over the course of a few months, things started changing in a way that felt really subtle at first. It started with them staying over more frequently, which fine, that happens in relationships. People stay at each other's places, but then it went from weekends to multiple nights a week to basically every single night. I remember one morning early on when I came out to make coffee and they were cooking breakfast in our kitchen like they lived there, which technically they didn't. But I figured Chris would eventually bring up the conversation about whether his partner wanted to contribute to rent or something. I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. I just wanted clarity. Then I noticed stuff. Their toothbrush appeared in the bathroom, then their shower caddy, then a full skincare routine. Their clothes started taking up half the closet in Chris's room. And here's the thing, I never had a conversation with Chris about this. Not once. He never said, "Hey, is it cool if my partner moves in?" Or, "They're going to be here more often." He just did it. It was like he was testing the waters with every small step, seeing if I'd say anything. And when I didn't immediately lose my mind, he kept going. About 4 months in, I realised this wasn't temporary anymore. I came home from work one day, and their car was parked in one of our 2 spots, again. And I walked into the apartment to find both of them there, like a normal domestic couple. They were cooking dinner together. They had keys, they weren't asking permission or explaining anything anymore. It just was. And at that point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't someone staying over. This was someone who had moved in without ever having the conversation with me. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt violating. This was my home. I signed a lease, I pay rent, and now there are 3 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and only 2 of us are on the lease. 2 of us are splitting bills. The 3rd person is getting subsidised housing essentially. And nobody asked me if I was okay with it. I started noticing other things too. They were using our utilities, eating our groceries sometimes. Their friends started coming over. The apartment felt crowded. It felt like I was the outsider in my own space. I finally decided I had to talk to Chris about it. I asked him to sit down one evening when his partner wasn't around. I kept my tone neutral, but I was genuinely frustrated. I said, "Hey, I've noticed your partner has basically moved in. We need to talk about this. They need to be on the lease or contributing to rent, or we need to figure out a different arrangement. But this can't just happen without me knowing." I thought it was a reasonable thing to bring up. Chris's reaction surprised me. He immediately got defensive. He said I was being unreasonable and gatekeeping the apartment. He said his partner wasn't living there permanently. They were just spending a lot of time there, which was obviously not true because all their stuff was there. Their name is on the mail now. They get mail at our address. But according to Chris, I was being controlling and immature about it. He said that if I had a problem with them being around, that was my problem to deal with, not his. I told him that wasn't how shared living arrangements work. I said that if someone is going to live in a place we share, that's something we discuss as roommates. It affects everything. The lease, the utilities, the space, the privacy, everything. I asked him if he'd be okay if I moved someone in without mentioning it to him. He didn't answer that. Instead, he said I was being selfish and that I was always against his happiness, which, no. I was against him making unilateral decisions about shared property. Things got worse after that conversation. If anything, his partner started being around even more. It felt like Chris was doing it deliberately to prove a point. Their partner would be there when I woke up, when I came home from work, late into the night. They started leaving their stuff all over the apartment, personal items in the bathroom, shoes by the door. They'd reorganize things in the kitchen. And every time I tried to bring it up again, Chris would just shut the conversation down. I eventually went to the landlord because I didn't know what else to do. I told him that there were technically 3 people living in the apartment now, and I asked what the lease agreement actually said about additional occupants. The landlord was actually pretty sympathetic. He said that a lease is a lease, and if someone's living there, they need to be on it or have written permission. He said he was going to send a notice to Chris asking about it, which, in retrospect, probably made things worse. When Chris found out I'd gone to the landlord, he absolutely lost it. He accused me of trying to ruin his relationship and his living situation. He said I was being petty and that I clearly didn't value our friendship. And the thing that got me most was that he never once acknowledged what he'd actually done. He never said, "Yeah, I should have talked to you first." It was just straight to me being the bad guy for not accepting his new living situation without question. The landlord ended up allowing the partner to stay, but they had to sign an amended lease and agree to contribute to rent, which was the reasonable solution. But now the apartment is awkward all the time. Chris barely speaks to me. His partner is polite when they're around me, but there's this tension. It's my home, and it doesn't feel like my home anymore. I'm counting down the days until my lease is up. I'm not renewing. I can't live like this, and I can't trust Chris anymore. He showed me that he doesn't respect boundaries or agreements, and he'll gaslight me if I push back on it. The wildest part is that he genuinely seems to believe he did nothing wrong. He thinks I overreacted, and that I'm the reason our friendship is damaged now. But the friendship got damaged when he decided our lease agreement didn't apply to him. Okay, so Chris really looked at a binding legal agreement and was just like, nah, this doesn't apply to me. And then when the actual landlord got involved, he somehow made himself the victim. The fact that he never once acknowledged that he should have asked first tells you everything you need to know about how he handles conflict. Just straight to defensiveness and blame shifting. Alright, so this next one is just rough. This is about someone who learned the hard way that confirming you'll be somewhere and actually showing up are apparently 2 completely different things. Here we go. I really thought turning 30 would be different. I'd spent the last few weeks planning this perfect birthday dinner at this upscale restaurant downtown. Nothing crazy extravagant, but nice enough that I felt like it actually mattered, you know? A place where you can have a real conversation and actually celebrate properly. I picked a date that worked for everyone, or so I thought, and I went through the effort of creating a group chat and sending out individual invitations to all the people I genuinely considered my close friends. The invite was thoughtful. I explained where we'd be, what time to arrive, even included the restaurant's address and parking info. I mentioned that it would mean a lot to me if they could make it. I wasn't asking for gifts or money or anything like that. I just wanted to celebrate with the people who mattered to me. That was it. The responses started coming in almost immediately, and I'm talking confirmations from basically everyone. My best friend since college texted back, saying he wouldn't miss it for anything. My co-workers, who I hung out with regularly, all said they'd definitely be there. A few people I'd known for years committed to the date. I even got one friend's girlfriend confirming that they'd both be coming together. I was so relieved, honestly excited. It felt like validation that all these relationships were real and solid. You know, like these people actually cared enough to set aside time for me, to mark the occasion. So I went ahead and booked the table for 12 people. I put down a deposit to reserve it. I even looked up reviews of the restaurant's menu so I could talk about it intelligently. That night before the dinner, I got a bit dressed up. Nothing over the top, but nice. Excited but nervous in that good way, where you're genuinely looking forward to something. I arrived at the restaurant about 15 minutes early. The staff greeted me warmly, showed me to the table, and I sat down. The table was set up perfectly. There were place cards, nice napkins, everything was ready. I texted the group chat right away, just a casual reminder that dinner was starting soon, and I was excited to see everyone. Then I waited and waited. At 6:15, the time we were supposed to start, I was still sitting alone. Nobody had arrived yet. The seats around me were completely empty. I texted again, this time asking in a more casual way where everyone was at. One person responded quickly, saying they got held up at work but were on their way. I thought, okay, that's fine. It happens. People run late. But then 6:30 came and went. Then 6:45. Still just me sitting at this table. Blue for 12, watching other groups of people laugh and enjoy their meals around me. The server came over and asked politely if I wanted to order drinks while I waited. I just nodded, trying hard not to make eye contact because I could feel the moment starting to shift in my chest. Something was wrong. I ordered a beer, sat back in my chair, and tried to look casual like I was just relaxing before my party arrived. Internally, I was starting to feel this knot forming in my stomach, this weird mix of embarrassment and something darker, something that felt like dread. Like, where was everyone? My best friend still hadn't texted anything. The co-workers who had confirmed so enthusiastically hadn't said anything. I started scrolling through social media, just out of habit, trying to distract myself, and that's when I saw it. My best friend had posted a story about being at a bar across town with people I didn't recognise. Not anyone from the dinner group, but still. He was out, having fun, laughing, and he hadn't even mentioned anything about the dinner he'd committed to. There was no apology, no update, just evidence that he was somewhere else entirely. I texted him directly, kept it simple and honest. "Hey man, thought you were coming to dinner?" He responded like 30 seconds later with some excuse about how something came up unexpectedly at the last minute, and he completely forgot to tell me. Just like that. He forgot. After confirming multiple times and saying he absolutely wouldn't miss it. After saying it was important to him. I felt this physical sickness hit me. By 7 p.m, nobody had shown up. Not a single person, not one. I had this table set for 12, and I was the only one sitting there. The server kept checking on me with this pitying look that made me want to disappear. I could see other diners glancing over at me, probably figuring out what was happening. Lonely guy at a big empty table on his birthday. The irony was cruel. That's when the messages started flooding in. One co-worker said something about how she'd actually already made other plans with her family and totally spaced that she'd confirmed for my dinner. Another friend said her roommate had invited her to something last minute and she felt like she couldn't say no. My college friend just said he wasn't feeling great and didn't want to risk getting me sick. Nobody had the decency to actually call me earlier in the evening and give me a real heads up so I could have just gone home and saved myself from sitting here like an idiot. I sat there for another 20 minutes just staring at my beer, hoping maybe someone would still show up. Maybe this was a delayed group moment and they were all coming together and just running really late. Maybe this was some kind of surprise situation, but that feeling faded pretty quick. It became clear that wasn't happening. So I ordered some food, ate alone at a table set for 12 people, paid the bill, including the deposit I'd put down, and left. The whole thing cost me around $200, but that wasn't even the worst part. I drove home and just sat in my car for a while in the parking lot. Just sat there with the engine off, checking my phone over and over to see if anyone would acknowledge what had happened. If anyone would genuinely apologize or offer an explanation that didn't sound like a complete excuse. Nothing came, no real messages, no phone calls, just silence. The next day, I got a few casual texts saying, "Happy birthday," and that they were sorry they missed it. But the tone felt hollow, like they were doing the bare minimum to not feel like completely terrible people. My best friend even posted a happy birthday message on my Facebook wall, like he hadn't completely bailed on something he'd promised. The whole thing felt performative and fake. What really messed with me was realizing that I'd been holding on to these friendships and relationships way tighter than they were holding on to me. These people would cancel on me without a second thought, but I'd been showing up for them for years, going to their events, their celebrations, being there when they needed someone to talk to or vent to. And when I asked for one evening, just a few hours of their time, to celebrate a milestone, I wasn't worth the effort. That realization hit harder than the empty table ever could. I haven't planned anything big with that group since. I still see some of them occasionally, but things feel different now. There's this distance that definitely wasn't there before, mostly because I've built it. I just can't look at them the same way, knowing how easily they discarded my invitation without a second thought. Wow, that's so brutal. The fact that people would just straight up bail on a commitment like that and not even have the courage to give him a heads up earlier is wild. And then the next day, they're posting birthday wishes, like nothing happened. That's not friendship. That's just going through the motions. This next story is about another kind of betrayal, but this one happens in real time. Alright, so this next one is about family dynamics and how some parents just can't seem to let their kids exist without constantly measuring them against someone else. And honestly, it's kind of heartbreaking because the person posting this clearly just wants to feel like their accomplishments matter. Let's get into it. I don't even know where to start with this, but I need to get it off my chest because it's been eating at me for years now. My parents have this habit of comparing me to my cousin in literally every single conversation we have. And I mean every single one. I'm 28 years old, I have a decent job, a stable relationship, and I'm doing okay for myself. But according to my parents, none of that matters because my cousin is apparently the golden child of our entire family. My cousin is 7 years older than me, which is important context because apparently being older automatically makes every accomplishment more impressive. He works in finance, makes good money, got married early, has 2 kids already, and lives in a nice house in the suburbs. Don't get me wrong, I'm genuinely happy for him. He's a good guy, but my parents have made him into this unattainable standard that I'm apparently supposed to live up to, and it's exhausting. Last year, I got promoted at work. I was genuinely excited about it. It was a big deal for me. I had been working toward this for 2 years, putting in the effort, taking on extra projects, proving myself to my leadership team. When I told my parents about it, I thought they'd be proud. My mum said, "Oh, that's nice. Did you get a raise?" I told her I did, and she responded with, "Well, your cousin got a promotion last year too, but he got a significantly larger raise because of his seniority in the finance sector. The bonuses are just different at that level." Like, okay, thanks for that reality check, Mum. I wasn't comparing myself, but now I feel like I should be. It's not just about career stuff either. When I mentioned I was buying a house with my partner, my dad immediately said, "Your cousin bought his place 5 years ago, and it's in a much better school district because he was thinking long-term for his kids. Have you thought about that?" I hadn't even moved in yet, and I was already being compared to a decision my cousin made half a decade earlier. Last Christmas, I brought my partner home for the holidays. I was nervous but excited to introduce them to the family formally. My mum loved them, or so I thought, but then at dinner, she turned to me in front of everyone and said, "You know, your cousin's wife is also very nice. She has her MBA though. She and your cousin make a great power couple. They're both so ambitious and driven. It's really inspiring to see." Then she smiled at my partner and added, "I'm sure you're doing great things too," and in that tone that definitely meant, but probably not as great. My partner handled it gracefully, but I could see the look on their face. They were uncomfortable, and honestly, so was I. The thing that really got me was when I was going through a rough patch at work a couple years ago. I made a mistake on a project, and it was genuinely stressful dealing with the fallout. I called my mum because I needed support, and instead of listening to me vent, she immediately brought up my cousin. She said, "Your cousin told me he once made a huge error at his firm, but he handled it so professionally that his boss actually respected him more afterward. Maybe you should ask him for advice on how to manage up after a mistake." So now even my failures are opportunities for my parents to remind me that my cousin would have handled it better. I finally tried to address this about 6 months ago. I sat down with my parents and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you guys about something that's been bothering me. I feel like whenever I accomplish something or share something about my life, you immediately compare it to what my cousin has done. It makes me feel like nothing I do is ever good enough, like you're always measuring me against him. Can we just celebrate what I'm doing without bringing him up?" My mum looked genuinely confused. She said, "We're not comparing you. We're just mentioning what your cousin is doing. We're proud of both of you." My dad agreed and added, "We talk about your cousin's achievements because they're relevant to the conversation you bring up. That's not the same as comparing you." But it is, though. It absolutely is. Because I never bring up my cousin. I never say, "I did this thing," hoping they'll talk about me. I share things because I want them to be happy for me. And instead, it always comes back to what my cousin has done that's supposedly better or more impressive. After that conversation, things got slightly better for about 2 weeks. Then I got engaged. I was over the moon about it. I called my parents to tell them the news, expecting them to be excited. My dad said congratulations, which was nice. But then my mum asked, "Oh, when are you thinking of getting married? Your cousin and his wife had such a beautiful ceremony. It was at this gorgeous vineyard, and they had a live band. Their photographer was incredible too. You should see the photos." And just like that, we were back to square one. I realised that my parents might not even be aware of how much this is affecting me. I don't think they're doing it maliciously. I think they genuinely believe they're just making conversation. But the cumulative effect of being constantly compared to someone else, especially by the people who are supposed to be in your corner, unconditionally, it just wears on you. It makes you question whether anything you do is ever going to be enough for them. The worst part is that I love my parents. I really do. But I've started dreading calls with them because I never know what accomplishment or life update is going to get overshadowed by a story about my cousin. I've even thought about just not telling them things anymore, which is sad because they're my parents and I want to share my life with them. But it's hard to be vulnerable with people who make you feel like you're always coming up short. Man, that's rough. The thing about parents is they don't always realise how their words land, especially when it's a pattern that's been going on for years. It's like they've built this mental narrative where your cousin is the achievement barometer, and now everything gets measured against that. That conversation attempt was solid too, but the fact that they didn't really hear it or acknowledge it just adds another layer to the whole thing. That's really frustrating. Alright, so this one's about expectations that are just completely unreasonable. This guy had no idea people were organising a whole thing, and somehow he still ended up being the bad guy. Let me tell you what happened. So my friend Tyler had been going through it. He lost his job about 4 months back and was really struggling to get back on his feet financially. We knew he was stressed, but he's the type of guy who keeps things pretty private. He doesn't like asking for help or making a big deal out of his problems. That's just how he is. After months of searching, he finally realised he needed to move to a smaller place because he couldn't afford his current rent anymore. It wasn't ideal, but it was what he needed to do. About a week before his moving day, I had no idea that basically everyone in our friend group was organising this whole coordinated effort to help him move. They were texting back and forth, setting up schedules, figuring out who could bring a truck, who would help carry boxes, what time everyone should show up. The whole thing was being planned without me. And I mean completely without me. I wasn't in the group chat, I wasn't texted individually. Nobody mentioned it, nothing. I only found out what was happening by complete accident. I ran into one of the guys at the gym, and he was like, "Hey, you coming to help Tyler move on Saturday?" I seen, and I genuinely had no idea what he was talking about. I was confused for a second, then it hit me that something was being organised and I wasn't part of it. I felt this immediate sinking feeling because I absolutely would have helped. Tyler's my friend, that's what you do, but nobody had told me anything. I went home and called the guy who had been organising the whole thing. I asked him straight up why I wasn't included in the planning, and his response was so casual, like it wasn't even a big deal. He said, "Oh, we figured you'd just know and show up." Just know? Like I have ESP or something. Like I'm supposed to somehow sense that my friend is moving and that there's a specific group effort happening on a specific day at a specific time. That's when things started going downhill. I pointed out that maybe, just maybe, a quick text would have been helpful. I wasn't trying to be difficult, I was just saying that communication is kind of important, but that's apparently not how it works in this dynamic. Instead of everyone being like, "Oh yeah, my bad, should have texted you," it turned into this whole thing where people started acting like I didn't actually care about Tyler. People started making comments. Not to my face at first, but I heard about it. Someone said, "I guess we know where Dominic's priorities are." Another person mentioned, "Seems like Dominic wasn't really there for Tyler when he needed everyone to be. It was like I was being judged for not showing up to something I literally didn't know was happening." The logic made no sense, but that didn't seem to matter. When I eventually talked to Tyler about it, he was hurt that I wasn't there for him, and I tried to explain I really did. I said, "Tyler, nobody told me you were moving. I had no idea there was a group thing happening. If you or someone had texted me, I would have been there." One back, but he kind of just shrugged it off like I was making excuses, like I was being defensive about something I should have just magically understood. The whole thing made me feel so frustrated and honestly pretty defensive. I wasn't trying to let Tyler down. I wasn't trying to avoid helping. I just didn't have information. And somehow that made me the bad guy. When I brought it up again later, trying to explain that I genuinely can't help with something if I don't know it's happening, the response I got was that I should be more proactive. I should just be more involved in checking on people's lives constantly, just in case something's going on that I should know about. It put me in this weird position where I felt like I was being blamed for something that was completely out of my control. You can't expect someone to contribute to a plan they were never told about. You can't be upset with them for not knowing something that was never communicated to them. That's not how communication works. That's not how being a good friend works. You have to actually tell people things. After all of that, something just shifted with that friend group for me. I felt less close to them, less willing to go out of my way, because it felt like no matter what I did, the expectation was that I should somehow read minds. Just know things. Anticipate situations without any information. And when I couldn't do the impossible, I was the problem. That's honestly wild. So he's supposed to have psychic powers, didn't use them, and somehow that's a character flaw? Like, you can't blame someone for not showing up to something nobody told them about. That's not how any of this works. If you want someone's help, you tell them. That's the whole system. Imagine expecting someone to read your mind and then acting hurt when they can't. Alright, so this next one is about what happens when someone treats your belongings like they're disposable and then has the nerve to act hurt when you finally put your foot down. This is the kind of friendship betrayal that sneaks up on you because it happens gradually, and by the time you realise what's going on, you've already lost a ton of stuff and your patience. Julian had been friends with this guy since high school. They'd grown up together, shared memories, actually had each other's backs, or at least that's what Julian thought. But over the years he started noticing a pattern that would slowly poison everything. Every single time his friend needed something, he'd ask to borrow it, and every single time he returned it, something was wrong with it. It started small. Julian lent him a pair of wireless headphones because his friend said he forgot his at work. When he got them back a week later, one of the earbuds was completely dead. The battery was fried. Julian mentioned it, and his friend just shrugged and said, "Yeah, sorry man. I fell asleep with them on and rolled over or something. But hey, they're probably not that expensive to fix, right?" Julian wasn't thrilled, but he let it go. They were friends. Stuff happens. Then came the skateboard. Julian kept a skateboard in his garage that he liked to ride sometimes for fun and exercise. His friend asked if he could borrow it for a weekend to go out with some other guys. Julian said sure, it was just sitting there anyway. 3 days later, when his friend brought it back, one of the wheels was completely warped and cracked. The grip tape was torn in multiple places, like it had been dragged across concrete. His friend casually explained that he'd crashed it and laughed it off. He didn't offer to replace the wheel, didn't offer to buy new grip tape, just acted like it was no big deal. But Julian kept lending things. His Xbox controller, his camping tent, his nice winter jacket. Each time something came back damaged in some way. The controller had a broken trigger button. The tent had a hole in the bottom. The jacket had a huge stain that wouldn't come out. And each time his friend would have some story. He'd spilled something on the jacket. The tent got damaged when they were setting it up in the dark. The controller got stepped on. The responses were always casual, always quick, always followed by zero actual attempt to fix or replace anything. What got under Julian's skin wasn't just that his stuff kept getting destroyed. It was the complete lack of responsibility afterward. His friend never once said, "Let me replace that for you." Never offered to pay for repairs. Never took any real accountability. He'd just shrug, offer a quick apology, and move on like it wasn't a big deal that he'd destroyed something that belonged to someone else. Years of this went on. A laptop that got spilled on during a night at his place. A pair of expensive hiking boots that came back stretched out and caked in mud. A camera tripod that came back bent at the base. A portable speaker that got dropped and stopped working. Each item, another small betrayal. Another test of Julian's patience. And through it all, Julian kept lending because he didn't want to be the guy who said no. Didn't want to be seen as selfish or unwilling to help a friend. Then his friend asked to borrow Julian's PlayStation 5. This wasn't a small thing. Julian had saved up for months to buy it. It was expensive and important to him. But his friend said he just wanted to borrow it for a weekend because some friends were coming over and they wanted to play together. Julian hesitated. Something in his gut told him not to do it, but he pushed that feeling aside. What kind of friend says no? His friend kept the PlayStation for 2 weeks instead of a weekend. When he finally brought it back, he didn't even come inside. He literally left it on Julian's porch. When Julian opened the box, his stomach dropped. The system was covered in dust. There were visible scratches on the front panel. When he turned it on, it made a grinding noise that shouldn't have been there. He took it to a repair shop, and they told him the cooling fan was damaged, and there was internal dust buildup that could affect the system long term. The repair bill was $150. Julian called his friend, and for the first time, he was genuinely angry. Not frustrated, not annoyed, but actually furious. He explained what had happened and asked his friend to pay for the repairs. His friend's response was absolutely shocking. He got defensive immediately. He said, "Dude, come on, I barely even used it. It probably was already having problems. You're being so dramatic about this." When Julian insisted he wanted the repair costs covered, his friend got worse. "I can't believe you'd ask me to pay for that," he said. "I can't believe that's where your head's at right now. I've been a good friend to you all these years, and this is how you treat me. By demanding money, that's cold, man. That's really cold." Julian stood there, absolutely stunned. This guy was somehow turning Julian's completely reasonable request into an attack on their friendship. The implication was crystal clear. If Julian didn't drop it, Julian was a bad friend. Julian was being selfish. Julian was the one in the wrong for having the nerve to ask someone to replace something they'd damaged. That's when Julian finally snapped. He told his friend that he couldn't lend him anything anymore. He said he'd noticed over the years that everything always came back broken or damaged, and he couldn't afford to keep replacing things. He was trying to be respectful about it, trying to phrase it gently, but he was firm. He set a boundary. His friend absolutely lost it. He accused Julian of being stingy. He said Julian had changed and wasn't the same person anymore. He told other people in their friend group that Julian had suddenly become materialistic and selfish, that he cared more about his stuff than their friendship. He made it sound like Julian had done something terrible, when really, Julian was just asking to not have his possessions destroyed anymore. The worst part was that some people actually believed him. A few mutual friends bought into the narrative that Julian was being unreasonable and petty. Nobody seemed to care about the years of broken items and zero accountability. They just saw Julian as the guy who wouldn't help his friend, without understanding that the friendship had been entirely one-sided. Julian got used. He got taken advantage of. And when he finally set a boundary, he became the bad guy. Wow, so he destroys your stuff repeatedly, never takes responsibility for any of it, and then when you finally ask him to pay for something he actually broke, suddenly you're the selfish one? The victim mentality on this guy is absolutely insane. That's the kind of friendship where you realize the other person never actually valued you or your belongings. They just saw you as someone to take from without any consequences. Honestly, Julian dodged a bullet by finally drawing that line. Alright, let's move on to this next story about workplace dynamics taking a turn that nobody saw coming. Alright, so this next one is about someone who got absolutely blindsided by a job that promised something it had no intention of delivering. And the worst part, when he tried to actually use what was promised to him, everyone acted like he was the crazy one. Let's get into it. I took this job specifically because of the flexible hours. I'm not going to lie, that was the deciding factor. I'd been working retail for 3 years, and I was burnt out. The hours were long, the pay was terrible, and I had zero control over my schedule. When I saw this marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized tech company, I almost didn't apply because I thought there was no way they'd hire someone with my background. But then I read the job posting again. It was plastered all over the description. Flexible hours. Work-life balance is a priority. We trust our team members to manage their time. It literally said we could work from home 2 days a week and adjust our hours as needed, as long as we hit our deadlines and attended team meetings. That was it. That was the thing that made me think, okay, maybe I can actually breathe at a job for once. I did 3 rounds of interviews. In every single one, they emphasized this flexibility. The hiring manager, Derek, specifically told me during the final interview that this company wasn't like traditional offices. He said, "We're not about watching the clock, we care about results. If you need to run an errand during the day, go run it. Just get your work done." I even asked about specific scenarios. I said, "So if I need to go to a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, I can just adjust my hours that day?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely, no problem at all." I was sold. I gave 2 weeks' notice at my retail job and started on a Monday. The first week felt different, exciting, you know? I had my own desk, nobody was breathing down my neck. I got settled into my tasks and everything seemed great. Then the second week, I got an email from Derek about the team schedule. Apparently, we all needed to be in the office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, Monday through Friday. No exceptions. I was confused because this directly contradicted what he'd told me in the interview. I figured maybe it was a miscommunication, or maybe this was just a standard email and the flexibility applied after a probation period or something. So I sent Derek an email asking about the flexible hours policy. I kept it casual. I just said something like, "Hey, just want to clarify the flexible hours we discussed during my interview. What does that look like in practice?" He responded a few hours later saying, "Oh yeah, flexible hours. Well, we do have that, but everyone needs to be here during core hours, which is 9 to 5. That's not flexible. That's just a normal job schedule." I asked what the work from home arrangement looked like, and he said, "We'll talk about that once you've been here longer." Okay, I thought, maybe this is just a new hire thing. I'll prove myself, and then I can use the flexibility. A month in, I'd already completed all my assigned tasks ahead of schedule. I was the person staying late, making sure everything was perfect, hoping to build some trust so I could actually use the benefits I was promised. One Friday afternoon, I had a dentist appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. It was scheduled for 2 p.m. I sent Derek an email in the morning saying I'd need to step out for about an hour and a half, and I'd make up the time. I wasn't even asking to leave early. I was offering to stay late or come in on the weekend if needed. His response was ice cold. He told me that appointments should be scheduled outside work hours, and that if everyone took time off whenever they wanted, nothing would get done. He said if it was really an emergency, I could take it as unpaid time, UNP, aid time, for a pre-scheduled medical appointment that I'd informed him about in advance. I went to the appointment anyway, because my teeth weren't going to wait, but I clocked it as unpaid leave. After that, I realised something was off. I started noticing that nobody actually had flexible hours. Everyone was there 9 to 5, every single day. Some people had told me during onboarding that they were technically allowed to work from home, but they were nervous about doing it because they didn't want Derek to think they weren't working. One co-worker, Rachel, told me in confidence that she'd tried to work from home once, and Derek had sent her passive-aggressive messages all day asking for status updates and making comments about how nice it must be to be at home. She never did it again. I brought this up with Derek directly about 3 months in. I scheduled a one-on-one with him, and I said, look, the job posting and our interviews emphasised flexibility as a key part of this role, but I'm not seeing that reflected in practice. Everyone's on a strict 9 to 5 schedule. I can't work from home. I can't adjust my hours. What's actually flexible here? Derek got defensive. He said that flexibility was available if I was self-managed and hitting my deadlines, which I was. He said, you have flexibility if you earn it. But when I asked what that meant, he couldn't give me a clear answer. He just kept repeating that the hours were there if I needed them, but he couldn't give me a single example of someone actually using them. I asked him to point me toward anyone on the team who had done it, and he changed the subject. I felt completely trapped. I'd left a job I hated based on a promise that wasn't real. I couldn't afford to leave because I'd just started and I needed the stability. But staying meant accepting that I'd been lied to in the hiring process, and nobody was going to acknowledge it. When I'd bring up the job posting or mention what Derek had said in interviews, I was met with this weird gaslighting where everyone acted confused, like I'd imagined it. Derek would say things like, I don't remember saying that, or I think you might have misunderstood what flexibility means in our company. But I had notes. I had the actual job posting, and it was crystal clear. The company website still has that same posting up right now. By the way, nothing has changed in the description. They're still advertising those exact flexible hours to new candidates. I lasted 9 months before I quit. I found another job that actually seemed legitimate about work-life balance, and I took it. When I gave my notice, Derek seemed genuinely surprised. He asked why I was leaving, and I told him honestly. I said, the flexibility you promised doesn't exist. You've created an environment where nobody feels safe using the benefits you advertise. It was misleading. He told me I was being ungrateful, and that plenty of people would love to have my job. Maybe they would, but they'd probably leave too once they realised the flexibility was a fiction. That's just wild. Derek literally created an environment where everyone was too nervous to use the exact perk he was advertising to get people hired in the first place. Like, why even mention flexibility if you're going to punish people for using it? That's just setting yourself up to lose good people who believed you. Speaking of jobs that go sideways, let me tell you about this next situation. Alright, so this next one is absolutely wild because it's about someone pointing out the most ridiculous hypocrisy at work and how their co-worker just completely refused to see it. So I work at this mid-sized marketing agency, and about 6 months ago, my company added a new person to our team. Let's call them Morgan. Morgan seemed fine at first, friendly enough, competent at their job, the usual. We had that typical getting to know you phase where everyone's polite and trying to figure out the new person's vibe. But over time, I started noticing that Morgan had this habit of taking these really long, frequent breaks throughout the day. Like We're talking stepping outside multiple times a day, sometimes disappearing to the kitchen for half an hour at a time, scrolling through their phone at their desk for extended periods. But honestly, I didn't care. Everyone takes breaks. It wasn't affecting my work or the projects we were working on together. I figured it was just how Morgan operated, and as long as the work got done, it wasn't my problem. Here's where it gets ridiculous. About 4 months in, Morgan asks to grab coffee after work. I'm thinking maybe they want to do some team bonding thing or talk about a project. Nope. Morgan sits down and basically starts lecturing me about my work habits. They tell me that I take too many breaks, that I'm always stepping away from my desk, that it looks unprofessional, and that it's affecting the team's perception of my productivity. They said I'm on my phone too much, and that maybe I should be more focused during work hours. They even suggested that my breaks were making it harder for them to reach me when they needed something. I just sat there for a second, completely stunned. Like, was this person seriously complaining about me taking breaks when they're literally the person who disappears 3 times before noon? I tried to keep my cool because I didn't want to be rude, but I couldn't let this slide. So I politely pointed out that Morgan probably takes just as many breaks, if not more, and that I'd actually noticed them stepping outside or being away from their desk pretty regularly. I said something like, I've definitely seen you take breaks pretty frequently too. I don't think I'm doing anything different than what everyone else does. And here's where Morgan's brain just completely short-circuited. They didn't acknowledge that I had a point. Instead, they started doing these mental gymnastics that were honestly kind of impressive in how absurd they were. Morgan said that their breaks were different because they were going outside to get fresh air for their mental health, and that their phone time was necessary for responding to personal emergencies. But when I take breaks, apparently, I'm just being lazy and distracted. They said that their situation was unique and that they needed those breaks to function, but that other people, meaning me, should be more disciplined. I asked them point blank how that was any different. How was their break for mental health more valid than my break, or anyone else's break? And Morgan got defensive. They said I was twisting their words and that they were just trying to help me be more professional. They said they noticed my breaks because they care about how I'm perceived in the office, and they were just looking out for me. But here's the thing, nobody had complained about my breaks. Nobody said anything about it affecting my work. Morgan brought this up completely unprompted, out of nowhere. And the more I pushed back on the hypocrisy, the more Morgan tried to reframe it as them being helpful rather than them being a complete hypocrite. I ended up just saying that I appreciated their concern, but that I thought my productivity was fine, and that I was going to keep doing what I was doing. Morgan seemed annoyed that I didn't take their criticism to heart, but they backed off. The absolute kicker came a few days later when I was in a meeting with our manager and a few other co-workers. We were talking about productivity, and our manager was asking everyone how they manage their time and focus during the day. One of my co-workers casually mentioned that they take breaks throughout the day because it helps them stay sharp and refreshed. Morgan didn't say anything, but then our manager asked about it and said that taking breaks is actually encouraged. They'd rather people step away for 10 minutes and come back refreshed than have someone burn out or lose focus. And Morgan just nodded along, like they'd always believed that. After the meeting, another co-worker who'd been there for years pulled me aside and asked if Morgan had said something to me about breaks. Apparently, Morgan had also complained to them about taking breaks. This co-worker had basically told Morgan to mind their own business. And then I realised what Morgan was doing. They were being critical of everyone else's habits while doing the exact same thing themselves. And when called out, they just tried to reframe it as concern or said their version was different. The whole thing was so absurd. Like, Morgan genuinely couldn't see that they were being hypocritical. They actually believed that their breaks were justified because of mental health, but mine were lazy. Their phone use was necessary, but mine was unprofessional. It was this complete lack of self-awareness that made the situation almost funny instead of actually frustrating. I don't think Morgan and I have really recovered that work relationship. There's this awkward tension now, where Morgan's clearly aware that I know they called me out, and I didn't just accept their criticism. And I think that bothered them more than their original concern about my breaks, if they even had a genuine concern to begin with. It feels like it was more about Morgan wanting to establish some kind of authority or superiority, and when that didn't work, they got defensive about it. Wow. So Morgan literally complained about break habits while actively doing the exact same thing. That's some next level lack of self-awareness right there. Like, how do you look someone in the eye and criticize them for something you do constantly and just expect them not to notice, and then when they do notice, you act like they're the unreasonable one? That's crazy. For our last story tonight, we've got something that hits different. This one's about discovering betrayal in the most unexpected place, and honestly, it's the kind of thing that makes you question everything you thought you knew about someone. Let's dive in. I found out my partner has a secret social media account dedicated entirely to complaining about me to strangers online, and I still don't know how to process it. I'm sitting here trying to figure out where to even start with this, because the discovery itself was completely accidental, but the fallout has been absolutely devastating. My partner and I have been together for 5 years. We got engaged 2 years ago. Everything seemed fine. Not perfect, but genuinely good. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we communicated well. I thought we were the type of relationship that could work through problems. Apparently, I was wrong about all of it. Last week I was setting up a new laptop and needed to get into some shared passwords. My partner had written them down in a note on their phone, and they told me I could just look at it while they were in the shower. I opened their phone, found the Notes app, and grabbed the passwords I needed. Simple as that. Except I noticed something else in their recently deleted notes. Just a username and a password with no context. I have no idea why I did it, but I opened a web browser and tried logging into that account on a whim. It was a private Instagram account under a completely different name. And when I got in, I immediately wished I hadn't. The entire account was dedicated to venting about me. Hundreds of posts going back over 2 years. 2 years, not days, not months, but 2 entire years of publicly complaining about our relationship to complete strangers. I scrolled through in absolute shock. There were posts about my habits that annoyed them. Posts about things I supposedly did wrong. Posts about my family. Posts questioning whether they should stay with me. Posts comparing me unfavourably to exes. Things like, he can't do anything right, and I'm basically a single parent in this relationship, even though we don't have kids. There were screenshots of text conversations between us, sometimes taken out of context, sometimes just normal exchanges that they'd shared to make me look bad. There were comments from followers giving relationship advice, telling them to leave me. And instead of defending our relationship, my partner would double down, adding more complaints, more ammunition against me. One post literally said, "I don't even know why I'm still here." It had over 200 likes from strangers, 200 people validating their unhappiness about our relationship. I felt sick, actually physically sick. I sat there on the couch with their phone in my hand, scrolling through years of private thoughts that they'd chosen to share with thousands of followers instead of sharing with me, instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things, instead of literally anything that normal couples do when they're unhappy. When they got out of the shower, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to throw their phone at them. I wanted to scream. I wanted to just leave. But I also felt frozen. Like I was trapped in this moment between before I knew and after I knew, and there was no going back to before. I asked them to sit down. I told them what I'd found. I watched their face completely drain of colour. They immediately went defensive, which I honestly wasn't expecting. I thought they'd be ashamed or apologetic or something, but instead they got angry. They said I had no right to go through their phone, that I was violating their privacy, that this was all my fault for snooping. I tried to explain that this wasn't about the phone privacy. This was about them publicly complaining about me, about our relationship to complete strangers for 2 years. But they kept deflecting. They kept insisting that I was the one in the wrong here, that if I'd been a better partner, they wouldn't have felt the need to have an outlet, that they needed somewhere to vent where there wouldn't be consequences, somewhere to vent without consequences. That's what they actually said. I asked them why they never just talked to me instead. If they were that unhappy, why didn't they bring it up? Why didn't we go to couples therapy? Why didn't they at least give me a chance to know something was seriously wrong? They said that whenever they tried to bring things up, I got defensive. But I still don't know what things they're talking about, because most of those posts were about really minor stuff. Normal relationship frustrations that you either work through or you live with, not things you broadcast to the internet. They told me that having that account was the only thing that made them feel less alone, that having people validate their feelings online actually helped them stay in the relationship longer. So basically, they were staying with me because strangers on Instagram were making them feel better about wanting to leave. That's the sentence I can't stop repeating in my head. I asked if they actually wanted to be with me. They couldn't answer. They just stared at the wall. That silence was worse than any answer could have been. We didn't sleep that night. We sat up until almost 3 in the morning in this horrible, heavy quiet, and they kept cycling between defending the account and apologizing for it, like they couldn't decide which version of events they wanted me to believe. At one point, they said they'd delete it immediately. But that doesn't undo 2 years of venting. That doesn't erase the posts or the screenshots, or the validation they got from strangers tearing me apart. I've been staying at my friend's place since then. We haven't really talked beyond logistics. They've apologized several times, but the apologies feel hollow. I don't know if that's because I'm too hurt to accept them or because they don't actually mean them. I can't tell anymore. The worst part isn't even the complaints themselves. The worst part is realizing that I didn't actually know the person I was going to marry. They had this whole secret life where they were that unhappy, and I had no idea. They had thousands of strangers who knew more about their real feelings than I did. How do you come back from that? How do you rebuild trust when someone chose to confide in the entire internet instead of you? I keep looking at our engagement ring sitting on my nightstand and wondering if they were staring at it while writing some of those posts. Wondering if they were already checked out while we were planning a future together. I honestly don't know if this relationship can survive this. Okay, wow, that one hits different because it's not just about a moment of dishonesty, it's about choosing to build an entire alternate world of complaints instead of just talking to the person you supposedly love. The manipulation of trying to make it the other person's fault for not giving them a safe space to share, when really they just wanted an audience to validate their unhappiness without any actual consequences. That's rough. Thank you all so much for spending the time with me tonight. Seriously, I hope these have given you some comfort knowing that literally everyone deals with this kind of stuff, and you're definitely not alone in feeling betrayed or frustrated by the people around you. If you found these stories helpful or just needed something to fall asleep to, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Drop a comment down below and let me know which story resonated with you the most, or share your own story if you've got one. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Sleep well.